Welcome to the WBC 2021 Annual Summit. To begin our program, please welcome the WBC's Chief Executive Officer, Edie Fraser, and Global Head of Corporate Sustainability for TCS and WBC Board Member, Balaji Ganapathy.
A warm welcome to our 2021 WB Summit on gender parity and diversity. And yes, our tagline with you is faster together through collaboration. As Robert Reese, CEO Forum and a board member WBC said yesterday, this is an historic summit and it's an historic 2 days as we stop and reflect where we've been with our vision of equal position, pay, and power for all business women. We stop and we reflect and we thank you with total gratitude. We've had over 3,400 registrants, over 57 of our women business partners and resources, our board, 400 champions from our advisory and leaders, our strong sponsors and corporation, and the message that we are a movement together and we will never rest or tire until we achieve gender equality with diversity. And we say that from our sisters of color, as we have never marched stronger. And WBC, with all of our stakeholders, is 34% diverse, and we will hold ourselves accountable. We've also set a goal of getting 10% men into our leadership as allies of her, and hold and thank you for really pushing ahead. We are building partners with our 9 action items, and our initiatives is so clear, as you all know them. More women CEOs, C-suite, board of directors, entrepreneurship and capital and technology and parity, and technology and changing the pipeline. So just think about, there's so much news about the great resignations, about so many women leaving the workforce. But you will hear from our CEO winners, and you will hear from our trailblazers and from us. If you've got the right culture, it can be the great recruitment and the great retention and the opportunity to make sure you've got the talent right and the supplier right. And as companies, you've built in CSR, which, as we would say, and Joey Ryman and Balaji Ganapathy, it's the CS opportunity of the new ESG. It is opportunity. You're going to hear about companies of purpose. The time is now to accelerate change, and we want to focus on certain areas of just looking through and learning. But we focus on action with the 9 action initiatives. But we also say we celebrate the biggest sea change is women joining boards of directors, 42% average this year, but not women of color. We see that across the board in the C-suite with change, but not enough women of color. We will make that change together. We will make that action, and we will accelerate together and be held accountable. And Balaji and I and all of us applaud those companies that are clearly transparent. We will move achievement and advancement. And we seek your bold goals. You'll hear from Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors, who says, I want to be the most inclusive company in the world. And we will see that over and over, company by company, to get there with a new commitment, the voice of collaboration, champions of change with total communications and use of technology, and yes, a celebration and a call to action. So to a partner in this bold action is Balaji Ganapathy from TCS. We've worked together for over a decade as we built STEM Connector Innovation Task Force, Million Women Mentors. And Balaji, you've always said, no more think tanks, only do tanks. So with that, we share Balaji with this wide world of WBC. Balaji?
Thank you, Edie. Such a pleasure to be here, and such a terrific day to have this sort of event kickoff. I mean, you spoke about do tanks, so let me kick off by saying that the secret to success is for a do tank is to convert good intentions to good actions and good actions to good outcomes. And nothing demonstrates this better than WBC. I'm proud and privileged to be a board member. And to me, there are two reasons why this is one of the best efforts in this space around the world, right? One is the force multiplier effect that comes with the power of collaboration. You can go far if you go alone, but you can go much further and do so much more exponentially if you go together. And so faster together, and the whole power of the collaborator is incredible. And the second is the relentless bias towards action. I think that is exemplified by UED, by the board members, by the partners that WBC has, and even the initiators. These are not committees or work groups. These are action initiatives where action and outcomes are what drives us forward. So these are two reasons I'm so excited to be part of this journey. And I think over the next 2 days, what all of you and all of us will realize is that there is more potential available for us to tap into to accelerate the journey that we are on. If we take a step back and look at where we are today as compared to a year or 18 months ago, yes, the pandemic has brought a lot of adversity, but it has also created a world of opportunity. Yes, there are inherent biases and stereotypes that have further been accentuated, but there is more recognition, there is more action, there is more commitment to change where it was and take us forward with solid commitments and actions against those commitments. The acceleration of adoption of new business models that have happened as a result of the pandemic is bringing about once in a lifetime opportunity, I believe, for all of us to really live the values that we have been talking about, whether it is empathy, whether it is moral leadership, whether it is resilience. These are not buzzwords. These are things that we can live. And I believe that using this opportunity to empower gender and diversity is the way you can truly live those values. And that is what the power of this collaborative is all about and has demonstrated through the CEOs, through the organizations, through the C-suite, the board, through entrepreneurs, through capital, through technology, through diversity. You look at any of the dimensions that are there, this is an inclusive group of leaders who are committed and driven to action. And I think, no one exemplifies this more than you, Edie, who have, ably led from the front and brought all of us together towards this common goal. I want to end by sharing that the power of the mission that WBC has is one that all of you attendees, all of you partners, all of us should really draw inspiration from. Equal power, equal pay, and equal position for women in business leadership roles. And that is what we will aim, that is what we will act towards, and that is what I believe we will achieve. And history will mark that the pandemic and the adversity that it brought also brought this opportunity for us to shift our gears and take collective action and accelerate. And these 2 days will give us the opportunity to learn from who has taken those actions, who can we collaborate with, who can we partner with. So I'm really excited, and I hope all of you are. And Edie, I want to really thank you for your dedicated efforts over the years, but for your inspirational leadership too, to lead us from the front. Over to you.
Thank you, Balaji. It's all of us. There's no I in we. And what you say about equality and opportunity and change is all we want to emulate as we ask everybody to take action. And then we do want to celebrate. Fortune magazine today named Allison Chantel the first woman CEO of Fortune in 92-year history. So every day, as you will see, we will shout out change, and we thank Fortune for being our partner, Forbes for being part of the program, and clearly we look at those that set the stage, including Judy Woodruff, Nina Totenberg, and Lisa Matthews that will close out this program. And Lisa, a Black woman, appointed the first all-female board of the National Press Club. Welcome to all, and thank you so much.
Well, I'm so excited to welcome our first ever WBC Trailblazer, and that's Thasunda Duckett. Wow, I'm so excited to be here with you. First of all, you are one of two current Fortune 500 Black women CEOs. You're serving as CEO of TIAA, and you've had a career of many, many firsts. In 2020, you became the first Black woman to join JP Morgan's operating committee, being named CEO of Chase Consumer Bank. And today, you're not only the CEO of TIAA, but you sit on the board of Nike with my former CEO, John Donahoe. As an avid advocate for empowering women through financial health, your career has paved the way for young women of color. So I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank you for putting out the call for women of color to use their voices as it's necessary and required to create change aligned to purpose. So if you don't mind, can we see that award? I know you have a few words that you want to share too.
Wow, thank you so much, Rochelle. It's so great to be here with you. And thank you to everyone at the WBC for this terrific honor. The first Trailblazer Award. So much gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
First, can you tell us about the key moments and opportunities that allowed you to rise to the top, to positions in business and in finance and Fortune 500 companies?
Yeah, so I think in order to understand where you are, you have to go back to where you've been. And so when I think about those moments, Rochelle, it starts with a strong foundation. You cannot achieve the level of success that I've been able to achieve so far without having the rock. And the rock to me is Otis and Rosie Brown. Yes. The rock for me is the history and understanding the shoulders of giants from which I stand upon today. And so just understanding the importance of your journey and where it really started is key for me. Secondly, I would talk about connecting with my ups and downs in life, because none of us have had just a perfect ascension. I've gone through ups and downs. I've gone through disappointment. I talk about the importance of financial health, which I understand at a personal level. And the reason why I think that's so important is in order to be a leader, you have to have empathy. You have to understand and have the ability to be in someone else's shoes. And clearly, I've had a lot of variations of shoes that I've had to walk in. I would also talk through Inroads. Inroads was my disruptor. And so for those of you who may not know, Inroads is a program that gives exposure to minorities in corporate America. And without having Inroads, to even know that there was this thing called corporate America that I could be a part of, I would not be here today. And then the last few things I would just quickly talk through is the ability to be okay being comfortable with the uncomfortability. There are so many times where I am the only in the room, or there are so many times that I've had to do those mental gymnastics in my head to reaffirm to myself that I am worthy and deserving to be exactly where I am and to be okay getting uncomfortable, taking the shot. The micro moments, the power of making sure you're present in the moment. I remember, Rochelle, that the CEO of the mortgage company at Chase asked me a question. It was the way in which I answered the question that compelled him to know a little bit more about me, that ultimately led to me joining JP Morgan Chase. And finally, I would talk about the power of advocacy, not just sponsorship. Being able to be clear on your brand, being able to be consistent on your how, allows folks to be willing to give you sponsorship and advocacy along the way. And that forged a pathway for me to ultimately achieve my first big goal, was to run a P&L. I didn't know it would be this type of P&L along the way, but just to get into the core of how a company makes money was important. So those are my moments, Rochelle, that I would say led me to this opportunity today.
Well, so those moments are so powerful, and I love how specific you were, because I think it's really helpful as people are just figuring out how they show up.
Yes.
And then how they deliver. You've helped to provide some of those really good nuggets. And so now, let me ask you this: how did you know you were ready for this big CEO role? What was it that drew you to TIAA?
Wow. So again, you want to talk about being comfortable, being uncomfortable. It's not that I knew I am absolutely ready and I'm going to crush it, but I was prepared. What I did know is that I've put in the work. What I did know is that I have delivered consistently in all of the chairs that I've sat in. And what I did know is that it was time for me to take my shot. And I think that's so important, because first, it's a mindset shift to really say to yourself, I may not check every box, but I'm ready to take the shot. And I know that I am credentialized to do the job well. And so that's that inner confidence. That's that inner reflection of your journey. Knowing, though, that I was going to be very uncomfortable once I got in, knowing that every day I'm learning something new. And what drew me to TIAA is like, what would draw anyone to TIAA? First of all, it's a mission-driven company, which you know, Rochelle, I'm so anchored in purpose, and I'm so anchored in financial inclusion. This company obsesses over ensuring that people can retire with dignity, especially those who serve others. It's a Fortune 100 company. It has a great consistent background and year-over-year performance. And lastly, I had to know that I could be productive, that I could help move a company forward. And so that's also understanding your attributes to say, if the company aligns with my values, which it did, if I can believe that I am ready, understanding that there's a lot to learn. Then the last part is, will I add real value to ensure that this company and the clients that we serve and the associates that I have the privilege to lead will say that because I was in the seat at this moment, this company is better for it. And so that's why I chose TIAA, because all of those stars absolutely aligned.
And they are so lucky to have you and your leadership and your commitment to people and development. And with that, what I'd love to understand is, as a woman of color, I know it's not easy for us. I know it's not easy for us in business, especially not in finance. What advice do you give young women today? And then also with that, how should companies work to increase women in leadership? Like, what do they need to do?
Wow, that's such a powerful question. Let me first say to women and to women of color, to Black women, that the price has already been paid for us to be. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that, it was the cooks, the secretaries, the janitors that entered corporate America and put those cracks in the ceiling, because they were the first to introduce our gender and our melanin to corporate America and to business, broadly speaking. So that's the first thing. is to know that your race and your gender is not a disadvantage, it's a differentiator. And I choose that mindset because I choose to say the essence of who I am is the difference, because I get to bring a perspective that we know is not yet equally in the boardrooms across corporate America when there's only 41 women leading Fortune 500 companies. And so my melanin, my gender, along with my knowledge and expertise and passion is my differentiator. And I choose to lean all the way in with all of that makes me who I am. So that's important for women and for women of color to embrace and understand unapologetically. What I would say to leaders, we have to decide. If we believe that talent is created equally, but opportunity is not, then we have to decide that we can do more. Once we decide, then you can put the steps in place. It's a mindset shift that we have to have as leaders. That mindset shift will lead you to get to the facts. What are the facts at every level of your organization? What are the facts in terms of women representation? What are the facts with people of color? Disaggregate people of color, Black, Latinx, Asian, etc. Disaggregate the data at all levels. And then finally, as we manage business, you have to manage the drivers that will yield the outcome. So obsess over what are the drivers that we can do that will yield the outcome that we want, which is equity, which is to make sure that everyone feels like they have a real shot. And that ultimately may mean look at your processes. If your processes or your behaviors are not giving you the outcomes you desire, and you believe talent is created equally, but opportunity is not, then you have to re-examine your processes and what you measure and how you compensate the outcomes that we know we need in order to operate at the highest and best level of our organization.
One of the things that I know is that you're guided by purpose. Yes. One of the things that I know is that every year you create kind of where you're going to focus and these affirmations that are going to guide you, for the year. And you're so deliberate about it. And the good news is you actually share it too. And so if you don't mind, I would love for you to talk about some of those personal affirmations, the things that are guiding you this year. And also, how do you create an opportunity for you to actually share your personal values and your priorities in a professional setting?
Well, first, I would be remiss to not talk about the power of the sisterhood. And so what's great about our sisterhood is that we pour on each other and we reaffirm each other. In the words of my father, people see your glory, but they don't know your story. And it's so important to be able to have that realness so that you are reminded that you are worthy and deserving. So thank you for being part of that sisterhood that affirms me when I need it. What I would say in terms of the power of affirmation, it is that reminder to myself that, Thasunda, on certain days, I may not be excellent, but overall, I am excellent. And so when I think about the affirmations, it goes back to what I teach my children. If you ask my youngest daughter, who's 5, what is she? She will say, I am smart, kind, and brave. That is who she is. And so when I think about each year, my word for this year, which is apropos, is amplify. That was my word. And then when I think about the power of amplification, think about the backdrop. We've come from a backdrop of a pandemic that we are still in. We're coming from a backdrop of social unrest. We're coming from a backdrop that took us all to our core to say, what am I doing and how can I do better? How can I be the change? And so when I think about amplification, the power of being able to amplify, it's amplifying every aspect of who I am. It's amplifying the power of being a mom, a sister, a friend, an executive. And so I just think words matter. And I think that it's important that we pour on ourselves, because there will be times where people are not pouring on you. There will be times where people want to drain you or use words that do not define you, where you have to return to sender. And so you have to be powered up in your own repertoire of positive affirmations to get you through. So my word is amplify. And I am trying to amplify every part of my life, including having the privilege to be the CEO of TIAA.
Wow, wow, wow. So I know we're at time. I want to first of all thank you so much for sharing these wonderful words and gifts for us. You've taught us something today. I also want to congratulate you on your award. It's so well deserved, so beautiful. It looks gorgeous next to that gorgeous top. And I want to thank you for your leadership and the journey that you're paving for so many others. And with that, I'll turn it over to the team. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sharon Reynolds, President and CEO of the Devmar family of companies, headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm also a board director for the Women Business Collaborative and the co-chair of the Advisory Council. I am a proud sponsor of the 2021 Women Business Collaborative Annual Summit. The WBC's focus on 9 action initiatives has a global impact on elevating women for change. Providing access to capital for entrepreneurs is paramount, while parity among women of color cannot be overlooked. Join us for an extraordinary summit, and let's make these changes faster together. Thank you.
Coming up next, the CEO Roundtable with the 2021 Excellence in Gender and Diversity Awardees.
Welcome, everyone, to the WBC CEO Awards for Excellence in Gender, Parity, and Diversity. On behalf of myself and Robert Reese, we are excited and really honored to have this chance to recognize extraordinary CEOs who have demonstrated their commitment and executive leadership to make gender parity and diversity a reality. And today we're really going to explore that a little further, but we congratulate our CEOs that have joined us today, and we're looking forward to having a rich dialogue to learn more from them around their leadership, their successful practices, and to really exemplify themselves as a role model for so many CEOs and organizations for really creating history at such an important moment for gender parity and diversity. And now I'm going to turn it over to my dear colleague, Robert Reese, who will really talk about the why for gender parity and diversity. Robert?
Thank you, Becky. And of course, why is at the systemic core of practically every great movement. So we are going to hear the personal side of the why from each of the 3 CEOs. Let's start off with Tricia Griffith, from CEO of Progressive.
Thank you, Robert. At Progressive, diversity, equity, and inclusion are fundamental to our core values. With so many acts of racism, homophobia, sexism, and xenophobia in our communities, this commitment is more important than ever. My diversity journey began in earnest when I led HR for Progressive starting in 2002. I was the only female on the executive team and really saw, and more importantly, felt firsthand how I held back on giving my opinions, my thoughts, and ideas because I lacked that confidence you get when the room is more balanced. I remember thinking that in this HR role, I was now the steward of our culture, and it needed to evolve, and that became my primary goal for every female at Progressive and still is today. So why is that? Diversity, equity, and inclusion allows us all to be able to bring our whole selves and really our best version of ourselves to work. After a lot of reflection, I had to admit that I hadn't been doing that up to that point in my career, likely based on the very male-dominated area of the company that I grew up with. I spent my first 15 years of my career in claims. And the fact that I didn't have peers who looked like me to run innovative ideas by and develop strategies for growth and success. That was the why on the personal side. It also happens to be very good for business results and just the right thing to do. As far as gender diversity, half of our customers are female, and it's critical to reflect the customers that we are so privileged to serve. It's also very important to have diversity objectives to hold leaders accountable. At Progressive, we're focused on 4 primary objectives, which have been in place for several years. The first one is to maintain a fair and inclusive work environment. At Progressive, we've committed to create an environment where people feel welcomed, valued, and respected. Number 2, we reflect the customers we serve. To serve our customers, we must understand them. We seek to be diverse in our employee demographics, experiences, and perspectives. 3, our leadership reflects the people they lead. Our goal is for our leaders to represent the people they lead, and we aspire to double the representation of people of color in senior leadership by the end of 2025, and hopefully many of those leaders are also female. And lastly, we contribute to our communities. We'll use Progressive's resources to support meaningful change in pursuit of equality. And finally, with the trifecta of having a female chairperson, a female CEO, and a female spokesperson, who you all know as Flo, we believe we're positioned for much continued success.
Thank you, Tricia. Jim Fitterling, the Chairman and CEO of Dow, the Why.
Thank you, Robert, for that introduction. It's great to be here and be part of the critical program with such recognized leaders. And I also want to congratulate WBC for continuing to push forward with this program and all the other initiatives to promote diversity and equity. It's a topic that's finally getting its full day in the sun, and clearly we're not where we want to be, but we're making progress. And through forums like this, we've at least begun to talk in earnest about where we are, where our successes are, our failures are, and what we can do together to move forward. I was fortunate in my Dow career to be introduced to diversity in a positive way early on. One of our oldest organizations in our employee resource groups is our Women's Innovation Network that was created now more than almost 30 years ago. And I joined the company as a sales rep in '84, and that was a fantastic introduction to the company and to our customers. But I quickly discovered that not everyone was the same, and not all companies shared the same values as Dow. There was one particular incident early in my sales career. We had a distributor, a large distributor in the southern US, I was based in Atlanta, who refused to work with one of my African-American colleagues. They wouldn't accept his meetings, they wouldn't take his calls. And I learned a pretty powerful lesson early on about principles and honor and values and your ability to demonstrate actions and not just words. Our zone vice president at the time, a white male in his late 50s, wouldn't even consider that we'd take that African-American sales rep off of that account. In fact, one Monday, we had a sales meeting every Monday morning, and one Monday after the weekly sales meeting, he took my colleague and he personally drove him 3 hours each way to our customer. And he sat down in front of the head of that large distributor in the Southeast and said, "Here's our Dow representative. If you want to work with us, you'll work with him, or you'll never get another shipment of Dow product ever." And it was a powerful episode. We didn't have social media back then, but I can tell you by the end of that day, everybody in that office knew where Dow stood, and they knew what we stood for. And if you fast forward 36 years, that episode still influences the way I think about the topic of inclusion and diversity, and especially as it comes to gender diversity as well as racial diversity. It set a strong tone about what a principled company looks like and acts like. And it isn't about talk. It's not about policies or vague HR statements that are on the wall. It's about taking action. It is about doing the hard work to create an inclusive culture, one what everybody wants to belong to every day, and one that everybody's proud of. And we've succeeded and we've failed at different points in our history, but I think most Dow people believe that we are on an achievable path forward on all these issues, including gender parity. It's about people leaders, and it's about role models like my first Dow Zone vice president, who refused to back down from those principles. And he led by example. Everybody's got their own example, and many of us have benefited from the allyship and the action of others, peers and leaders along the way. When we improve representation, gender, racial, ethnic representation, and it's important that we make progress on all of them. We're not just moving closer to parity or equity for any one of those groups. We're adding more role models to our ranks. We're increasing the diversity of experiences around our meeting tables, in our labs, in our manufacturing plants, and on our teams. And with that comes better ideas, more solutions, and an even greater opportunity for further progress. So that's why I'm so glad to be here today and to see the other role models who are also leading the charge on inclusion and diversity and equity issues, and to be part of the discussion on what's worked for us and how we move forward together to create greater diversity and equity.
Thank you, Jim. Now, Barbara Humpton, CEO, Siemens USA.
Thank you, Robert. And first, thank you to the Women Business Collaborative for this honor. It's incredible to be recognized among so many accomplished leaders, including Tricia and Jim. And it's incredible to work alongside accomplished female leaders on our US board and our leadership team. Something I've been sharing recently is the perspective that we're not going backward, we're going forward. And that applies to how we should flex every muscle to advance gender equality, diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplaces. At Siemens, our focus is on supporting the vital industries and critical infrastructure that are the backbone of America's economy. We're a technology company, and we believe in technology's potential to shape a more just and equitable society. But to do that, we have to model the change we want to see. So we're championing two priorities that are important for connecting women with leadership opportunities throughout our organization. The first is empowering people to bring their full, authentic selves to work. And this speaks to the reality that we need people with diverse capabilities and perspectives to get the best results in our business, just as you've heard from Jim and Tricia. The second is fostering a growth mindset among our teams. We want our employees to believe they can learn new things, do new things, and meet the challenges ahead. That's how we'll pursue big ideas and solve big problems. But it's also how we can make it possible for everyone to realize their full potential. So I'll share just this one final point. It's not lost on me that the opportunity I have today to serve as CEO is because of the trails others have blazed before me. And here's the why. I see it as my responsibility to continue their progress so that things are better for the next generation. And so Siemens is a place where anyone can belong and grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. So we've heard the whys. Now we're going to go into 4 questions that Becky and I will work with. And we're going to discuss the perspective of how the drivers of these are for gender equity and diversity. And the first one is on boards. So let's start back with you, Barbara. So you have 40,000 employees, and your board in the United States is really all women right now. Talk about your thinking. And I know that you actually handed from Judy Marks, a woman before you, brought you in as CEO.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic story. And it's really this simple. Who's got the best talent for the role that needs to be formed? It's really interesting that we have seen a team of experts rise to key roles within the Siemens Corporation, be it in our general counsel, our chief financial officer, our head of communications and external affairs. These are women who have really shown their capability to help us shape our future. And so it's been natural that they've risen to these leadership positions. In addition to our corporate board being all women, we have a U.S. leadership team, which comprises the key businesses that perform here in the U.S. As arms of their global businesses, as well as the major functions that serve these businesses in the U.S. And a full third of that leadership team is female today. And I think it reflects a larger trend, this idea of who can be a leader. It continues to change. I don't know about you all, but early in my career, what I heard was I wasn't exactly executive material, that I was different, I was unusual, too nice.
but I knew deep down inside, I loved the work I was doing. I loved being part of a team and contributing. And I felt that I had something the business needed, even though I didn't fit the mold of executive management. So what I'm hoping for is that in our organization, we continue to see diverse styles and natural capabilities really come together around a shared purpose. We can be mission driven, and that this mutual respect for the expertise of each of us can pull us into high performing teams that accomplish more than we could do otherwise.
Thank you, Barbara. Jim, in asking you about the board at Dow, you have 27% women right now, and you're focused on the independent directors deeply. Talk about your thoughts.
Yeah, we have 11 board members, including myself. I'm the only management board representative. 55% of our board members are either gender or are racially diverse. And that's been an intentional target that we've driven. And I think, like Barbara mentioned, inclusion diversity begins at the top, and many things where we're trying to govern, the tone gets set at the top. And in this case, it gets set with our board, and our board has always been active and pushing. In fact, for many years, our board was more diverse than our management team at the company. It's important for that reason. It also gives us a more effective and comprehensive understanding of some of the complex risks and the issues that face a multinational corporation. And it helps the company foster a more inclusive and innovative corporate culture. The board pushes the management to have and create an environment where everybody feels welcome in the company. And it's our highest level of governance in the company. It's our most public and visible reflection of our company to our shareholders. So it's important that our employees and all of our stakeholders can clearly see the representation at our board and the representation down through the organization, starting at the very top. And I think we've all seen studies for many years that a company's financial performance and the connection between diversity and the financial performance is linked. McKinsey's report in 2020 on why diversity matters said that diverse companies are 36% more likely to have above average financial performance. And Tricia mentioned it earlier. If you're going to collaborate with customers and you're going to be innovative, you have to have a lot of diverse perspectives and viewpoints. And in order to do that, you need people who look different and act different and bring their whole selves to work every day. We've had a lot of discussions on refreshing the board membership with emphasis on diverse experience as well as diverse racial and gender backgrounds. We've appointed 4 new directors in 2020 and 2021. And right now we're first quartile for board diversity among our peers. And at our management team, we've got a target to get to 50-50 parity by 2025, and we're well on our way to do that. So we're very committed, and it's starting to have an impact throughout the entire organization. And I think you'll continue to see more progress from Dow.
It's great. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. So now, Tricia, let's talk about the board. And you're right. I left out Flo, which is our beloved person. But you've really achieved gender parity, and you have 45% of the board are women, and your chair as well is women. And we're waiting for the day when it just becomes standardly called chair, no longer chairman. Talk about the process you went through to get there.
Absolutely. And there's 2 things. Jim said something about being intentional. That is number 1. And Barbara said, we're not going back. And that is also so evident in how we think about going forward. And when you think about the history of board composition, a lot of it was who you knew. And if you were a CEO, you were likely male, likely white. And those were the people you worked with. And you knew that person did a nice job, and so you would nominate them for another board. And that is sort of how it got exacerbated. And the problem is, when I was head of HR, head of claims, chief operating officer, really big jobs in a multi 20, $40 billion company. I was trying to get on a board. I thought that would be really great to set me up to understand if I could compete for the CEO role. And my predecessor at the time was having me work with all the search firms. I have a business background. And so he thought this was his perfect package for a board member. No one called me. Now, the only reason I got on a board before I was the CEO was because a prior board member at Progressive who had retired had me on his board because he saw my leadership skills. And that was really because I didn't have that CEO, those 3 letters after my name. And so I think we've really changed. And so when I had the opportunity, when I got the CEO role in 2016, I knew I was going to be intentional and leverage retirements and openings to be able to make sure that we evolved. And it's so outwardly focused that also from the employee base at Progressive, they see that we took action. And so first and foremost, I talked to Lawton, my chairwoman, and said, as the chair of the nominating and governance committee, can we do this search together? Because I think it's really important for both skills as well as who will be added to your board to actually, really have action plans around that. So we started our search and have added 3 board members that are female. So now we have 12 board members, including myself. 6 are female, 6 are male. The first one, who all of you know, I'm not going to name all of them, but Pam Craig has been great. And she she was a CFO of Accenture, great, obviously financial acumen. And then we started searching out for different types of skills. And we did use a search firm at one point and added a young, bright, tech-savvy African-American woman who knows Silicon Valley, brings so many ideas to the table. And then we were sort of full. And you can always have a range of 12 to 14 or 10 to 14 board members. And we were full. But another board member who knew I was thinking about this and really caring deeply about making sure we reflected my employee base and our customer base met a woman at an NACD conference, and he said, I met her in the elevator. I think you'd really like her, Tricia. And she happens to be a retired 3rd-star admiral in the Navy that knows Russian, is a cyber expert. Who would not want a cyber expert on their board? So I flew down to Florida, met her, and added her to the board. So my reason for telling that story is, let's look a little bit deeper in organizations. There are some brilliant women and people of color all around our organizations that can really be additive to your board. And that's really what I wanted to make sure to have happen. And then, of course, we're doing the same thing with Progressive as we fill the top of the funnel, and we're not as good. I have opportunities as I have a few retirements coming up to continue to change the look of my board as well, from both a gender and ethnicity perspective. And again, it takes time. You've got to do it in the right way. You can't just say I'm going to add women or people of color, because that will degrade the system. It has to be people that are additive, intentional, and people, when they know you're going to take action when you have the opportunity, they believe in you and they know that it'll take time. So I'm excited about the future and excited about the fact that we're having this conversation. And like Barbara said, we're not going back. We're moving forward, doing it in the right way.
And this is great. As you're listening in the audience, well over 1,000, I think close to 2,000 people. The one thing that I really see in Tricia, Jim, Barbara, passion. You are committed and you're passionate about this. And that's how we're moving this whole movement forward. Now we're going to move on from speaking about the board into the management and leadership C-suite. And Becky, all yours.
Thank you, Robert. And the board of directors is so important, because what we're going to be talking about the rest of this program, the board can have so much influence and drive commitment within the organization. And so congratulations to all of you for putting that effort into your board of directors. But we are going to talk now about the C-suite, about the pipeline around driving talent. And post-COVID, the dynamics have really changed to many degrees. And so we've had to really sharpen our pencil around that, but just so important around gender parity and diversity. Tricia, let me just start off with you. I believe that your workforce is 56% women. So that's a pretty robust pipeline. Could you just share with us, what have been some bold moves? You've given us a little color around the board of directors, but could you please share with us what you think needs to happen and what you've done? What has been some bold things you've done around your leadership to really accomplish that, and advice you have for others?
Yeah, I think you really need to make sure you make investments. So what happens is you can hire 50, 55% females, but as they move up in the ranks, it becomes more difficult, whether it becomes they're the fact that they, are the primary childcare. And we're seeing that in the pandemic. And one thing I think all three of us and every CEO needs to think about is what happens in the workforce as we come out of the pandemic. As more people work from home or in a hybrid situation, how do you lift up and elevate the people that may not be walking the halls every day? So that's probably for another day, but we started investing in programs about 10 years ago to elevate women and people of color into that first rung of leadership. And then we started formulating programs. We have what we call a multicultural leadership development program, where you apply for it and we give a cohort of about 20 people a real great meaty business problem to solve. And then they present to us. And the people that go through that program are about 40% more likely then to get a promotion. So we saw that working. And so now we've doubled down on that investment. And then you have to do things like we've all been talking about intentionally. So probably 3 years ago, we looked at sort of maybe 2 rungs under my team and said, wow, there's some great women there, but there aren't any roles opening up. So we do intentional swaps. We swapped out 7 people, and the majority of them were women, gave them jobs in totally different functional areas of the company. And by the way, they're all doing extraordinarily successful. And in fact, since then, a couple of them have gotten promoted. One is actually working for me now, running our $6 billion commercial lines organization. So again, investments, intentional. You have to be talking about this all the time. You have to paint a picture for the whole organization so they see the value in it, that they understand, wow, when this happened, we actually did, grow faster than our competitors. And we're continuing on that trajectory. And so again, using that, and we have employee resource groups to sort of boost that. It really is about using it like you do any other business plan, and because it's as important. And so that's what we've been doing really for the last 10 years, probably a little bit before then. And I would say we've ramped it up substantially in the last 5 years. And that's what excites me, because it really is about that momentum, and you start to see these leaders and you're like, they're going to be the next, name the job. And so that's our business plan. I talked about some of our objectives. We hadn't until last year had numerical objectives or goals to get to a certain place with women and people of color. And I realized that we couldn't just keep doing the same thing. We had to put objectives out just like we do our financial objectives. And then people think of it differently. And you know what? I think, and I believe, and I talk to progressive people all over, 45,000 people, they love it because they see the fact that it is good business.
Absolutely. Tricia, and thank you for that. Jim, I know you have worked on talent, built out a global talent team now since you've been in the executive leadership role at Dow, and congratulations for that. And as Tricia said, and all of us, there is and we know a really important business case around talent. But let's talk about pipeline and driving that talent. What are some of the things that you feel good about that Dow has accomplished, and any specific areas, practices that you've been able to employ that have really driven that success?
Yeah, thank you. And just picking up a little bit from where Tricia left off, we just last board meeting reviewed our succession plans with the comp and leadership development team, and I was happy to see, we've got a succession pipeline that's more than 40% female in the company. And just to give you a perspective, our average representation is a little over 30, and in the manufacturing ranks, it's much, much lower than that. So we've done a lot to really move up the management pipeline talent to over 40, between 40 and 50%. And obviously, our goal is to get that at gender parity. And so I feel good about the progress we've made. We've been intentional about putting inclusion and diversity metrics into our people leaders performance awards, our annual performance awards, and we have specific targets that we want to achieve there. In 2020, we started with the top 300 people leaders in Dow just to test how it worked. And this year, it's all people leaders in Dow globally. And that's having a big impact on how things have been moving forward. We now hire at parity into our salaried positions. So we're at parity today in salaried positions. And we just, in the last couple of months, have announced some specific hiring managers with the intention to hire females into the manufacturing workforce. Also, we have to create the right environment for them to succeed in that area. A lot of women, I think, opt out of the manufacturing workforce because they don't think they fit. But there are many, many jobs in that workforce that should be open to them. And I think you've got to make those introductions and you've got to make those connections to make that work. We also put a lot of effort on coaches and sponsors and mentors for the women in the organization. Ernst & Young is a company that we work with, and through our involvement with them and organizations like Catalyst, we use the Ernst & Young Power Up program for women and also sometimes for men to recognize, behaviors that are holding them back and building behaviors that will help us to move forward. We've had more than 1,000 women and 300 men around the world participate so far in Power Up, and it's making an impact. And then there's a program which we have called MARC, M-A-R-C, Men Advocating Real Change, in partnership with Catalyst. And we work with them on engaging men as allies, much like the story I told at the beginning, how a mature white male was the one that intervened and really stood up for racial diversity in the company. Networking is important. Our Women's Innovation Network, one of the challenges we hear from women all the time is, and we see from leaders when they're going to hire is, well, I don't know somebody, and that becomes an excuse for not selecting diverse talent into a role. And so we put an intentional networking program in to make women in our organization more visible across the company. And in my view, we're just taking away that excuse that you don't know somebody. That's not going to be acceptable. And then global hiring standards have changed tremendously. In 2020, we set requirements for job postings. We require diverse candidate slates for every job and diverse interview teams. So not just the candidate slates, but the interview teams. And we have the systems in place to be able to monitor that and track that. And I think Tricia made a comment about the pandemic and the impact that it's had. I think we hear a lot of stories about women being under stress through the pandemic and hoping to leave and thinking about leaving organizations. And I would encourage them to think just the opposite. I think a lot of things changed during the pandemic that long-term are going to be very positive for women in the workforce. We're addressing things that have always been a challenge around flexibility and juggling the demands of home and work. And I think we're in a much better place today coming out of the pandemic to be more flexible in how we allow people to use their time freely, allow them to be more productive, allow them to juggle the demands that they have. So I would just make a plea to women who are in the workforce. This isn't the time to opt out. I think we're on the threshold of some things that need to be more ingrained in the way we do work that will help women. They're taking hold right now.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I heard two words here. I think one is that you've really driven accountability within the organization. Barbara, I know you've done a lot of work around pipeline. And I will say to note that you, as well as your previous CEO, are women, have been women. So congratulations to that, because I think when we see that accomplishment of women who are CEOs, there's more of I think it's possible. We can do this, right? So congratulations to that. But your thoughts, your your leadership has made a difference within Siemens USA around pipeline and talent. Tell us some of the things that you're excited about, that you feel good about in terms of the things you've put in place at Siemens.
Yeah, and I'm delighted that the word intentional keeps coming up, because really this is the point. We have to have an end in mind. And at Siemens, we are a company of engineers. And so it's natural for us to look at the whole system and ask ourselves, hey, if this is our intent, what do we have to do to get there? And so I'll build on Tricia and Jim's comments with maybe, reaching further back in time in that pipeline. Think about STEM and where an interest in STEM is first ignited. And so at the Siemens Foundation, we've spent over $130 million on STEM programs in K through 12. And then you start to look further, closer to that point of employment, and you say, well, talent exists everywhere. How am I going to find the diverse candidates that are going to really power our future? And so we've been building career pathways much more broadly than just traditional four-year degrees. We've been, through the Siemens Foundation, working on youth apprenticeships so that we get people started earlier, getting interested in a manufacturing career. But then you think about other non-traditional ways to bring candidates into our workforce. And recently we partnered with the HBCU Partnership Challenge, getting a more diverse population of interns into our pipeline. And then for mid-career, we've reached out to organizations like Bossmaker and Fairy Godboss, who are helping us to be introduced to women who might not be aware that they can enter this field mid-career. So really, I think that as we think about fostering more avenues for greater engagement, more connection points for women who might be interested in joining our team, then yes, we can, as we bring them in, have them join our ERGs, have them recognize that they do belong here. All of that is key. And so, this pipeline is really about helping people believe anything's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Barbara. And I think one of the things we tend to focus on or used to is the folks that are ready now. And that's not always the pipeline. We need to really build and address those leaky pipes and create those bridges for people to come on naturally, right? And feel like they're valued early on. So thank you for that. I want to leave just a few more minutes just here in our conversation around C-suite, right? So that's always been a challenge. We're making progress. And however, we have more to go. So tell us a little more about the C-suite. What are your thoughts? Perhaps what is that sort of obstacle, and what do organizations need to do to open up those pathways for us to get more diversity and women to onboard into those roles and to be successful? I'm going to really just turn it over to Tricia. If you could just comment on that first, and then we'll go to Jim and Barbara.
Absolutely. One of the things that I have done is I tell my story. So I was in 2001, 2002, the highest ranking female in claims. And I sort of thought in my head, that's where I would end. I grew up there. That's what I would do. And our head of HR came open. I don't have any HR experience. My predecessor was looking externally. I thought that was good because we didn't have a lot around diversity and inclusion. We didn't have a lot around metrics. I'm a business person, so I was watching who he would take from the outside. He ended up not finding anyone, and he opened it up internally. So now I'm watching internally, never thinking I should go for it or I could go for it. How presumptuous of me with marketing degree and only claims experience to go for the head HR job. And so again, I'm watching him and watching the people that are going for it. And then people started to call me, people I'd worked with, around, and the calls would go like this. Tricia, you've got to go for that job. You love metrics, you love diversity, you love culture. That would be a perfect job for you. And I would say, thanks, that's great, but I would never, that would just be embarrassing to actually call the CEO who I'd met once. Until I had a woman that I'd worked, with for many years, and she called me about 3 or 4 times and finally said, you're really shortcutting yourself. Why don't you start with this? Why don't you have a lunch with him and kind of tell me what you've been telling me for the last 5 years of how you think the job should be? And that seemed a little, that bite-sized piece seemed a little bit more, in my style. So met with the CEO, and it was pretty empowering because I had a job I loved and I knew I wasn't going to get this job. So I laid all my cards on the table. And in the end, I got that job. And the reason I tell that story internally and externally to Progressive was shame on me for not seeing in myself what she and I probably had 7 other people who called me to tell me that. I had kind of put myself in that box. There's that Hewlett-Packard study that was done so many years ago that females don't go for a job unless they have 100% of the qualifications and males have 60%. And I was right there. I told this story of myself that I couldn't do that job. And, for me, it's the confidence and having people lift you up and say, why aren't you doing this? We're all watching you from afar and we're saying you can do this. So for me, it's telling the story and paying it forward. Just recently, one of the females that was in the swap I talked about had already gotten her second job since then. So she's moving up and we're making bets on her because she's really smart and really just a great person and follows our values. Another job came open, and it was probably sooner than practical, but I saw her in that role. And I asked the hiring person, could I call her just to kind of, she's not going for it, and I don't know why, because I kept thinking to myself. I called her, she was at home and said, I think that'd be really hard to do during a pandemic. I'm like, why? And I kept saying, why? And she said, I kind of have imposter syndrome. I don't know that I could do that. It's such a big job. And she went through all these excuses. And I said, I am not going to be the hiring manager, but I don't know why you don't put yourself out there. And she said, you know what, let me think about it. Long and short, she ended up putting herself out there, ended up getting that job. And so it's my role to talk to those women, tell them my story, be open about my insecurities, because I think once you get that CEO role, people look at you and they're like, oh, they're so confident. They have it all made. We all have the same insecurities that everyone has. And if you can be authentic and be vulnerable, then I think people also feel like they can too. And we push them to be their best versions of themselves.
Yeah. So Jim, tell us more about C-Suite on your end, and what do you think needs to happen? What are some of the things that you're doing at Dow to really make that difference?
I think there was some discussion earlier about board memberships and representation. Historically, the only person in Dow that would serve on an outside board would be the CEO. And when I came in, I had quite a bit of discussion with the comp committee and said, look, I think we need to expand that. As I was trying to get more diverse talent onto my board, if I'm looking for female talent and the requirement is they have to be a CEO or a CFO, that pipeline is pretty thin. And so, I said, look, I'm getting calls all the time, seeing if my people are interested in sitting on a board. And obviously, it's hard to run your business and serve on more than one board. So we said, look, at my discretion, we can have people on my leadership team serve on an outside board. And we have to work out, obviously, the timing. They have to put their Dow priorities first. But I think that's helped in a couple of areas. It gets experience for the women that serve on those outside boards. And it gives them a perspective. I could talk all day long, but it just gives them a perspective that they can never get in a discussion with me, which is understanding what the role of the board is, seeing the role of the CEO from a different perspective, understanding the difference between running a corporation and running a business P&L and all the things that you have to deal with. And that, to me, has opened a lot of doors. And I think it's made us more appreciated for doing that, where I might run the risk of losing those candidates. Now they're motivated about what they're doing. They're getting a different perspective. They're bringing that back into their own Dow work, and people in the organization see that. So I think it's a real positive. And I think once you make a move like that, it builds on itself.
I think you're right, Jim. I think one of the biggest obstacles, I think, based on the research, is women don't have the access or visibility to P&Ls, to operational sort of opportunities. So giving them that environmental business context really expands their aperture, and I think just really sets them up for success, right? And that greater confidence in the organization. So great work on that, great perspective. And Barbara, I'll turn it over to you to kind of pull in the last piece of the conversation on any words of advice or things that obviously you have women in your C-suite, right? Your two last CEOs have been women. What advice do you have?
Yeah, we're talking a lot about the candidates, but let's turn the lens around and examine our own motivations. The best advice I can give is get clear on what are the capabilities and skills you're looking for in that executive at this moment in time. And let me give you an example. We have a startup within our corporation, a new consulting firm. And in the US, it's a tiny team, and we really need to get this startup rocking and rolling. And so the question was, who should we look to be the CEO of Siemens Advanta US? And you know what we found? The lawyer for the global consulting firm had actually come to Siemens from a startup herself and had the perfect experience, the perfect qualifications to lead this team here in the US to growth. So we've just appointed Rainey Shea as the CEO of Siemens Advanta US, and she's the right person at the right time.
Excellent, excellent. And I think you made a really important part is know what you're looking for, have objective criterion that is for everyone, right? Versus taking that subjective lens or that subjective view. So really, really important there. Tricia, I just wanted to wrap up here and circle back with you on the ERGs. I mean, you've had a lens here around people being the CHRO for Progressive and then moving into the CEO role. But you, under your executive leadership, have created 9 ERGs across the organization. And I heard you share that it's embedded in our the DNA and the culture of the organization. That was notable for me. Tell me more about, I think it's called Networked Women, and to share for the sort of knowledge of other organizations here, how have you created and leveraged these ERGs to be of value, not only for the individuals that are in it, but for Progressive as well?
Absolutely. So it's Network of Empowerment of Women. And that was, I think, the third one we started. And I'll tell you why, because when I first started thinking about this 2002, 2003, I formed a team of women to talk about it. And right away, I just don't think we were ready for it, whether it was Progressive or society, because it felt like, okay, here's Tricia, the first female CEO, and then a group of women, a very small group because there wasn't that many to choose from, making this sort of exclusive group. And of course, the whole premise of ERGs are around inclusivity, being the verb, now, the noun being diversity. And so we started new sometime after we started the first two. And it was really based on me doing a lot of research around how important it was for people to talk with others like themselves. And of course, it is inclusive. So you want people from around the whole organization so you can actually stand in the shoes of someone else. And so whenever I talk to every new hire class, and we've been hiring thousands of people, I talk about you join one, join two. But when you go back to employee resource group, it has to be about, is there a demographic that you believe can be additive to have a mission around an ERG? And the first one I started was from a conversation I had a Monday morning, came into the office, a good friend of mine was there. And I said, how was your weekend? And he said, I hate that question. I said, oh, kind of Monday scary. And he said, no, a little bit of history. He's gay, was out to me, but not out to other people within Progressive. And he said, every time people ask me that, I feel like I'm lying, because if I had a date, I can't really say that. So I always say, went out with friends. And I was devastated because I have known him forever. He's still here. I tell that story with his name within Progressive because he loves it. And that's when I started LGBTQ+. And because I kept thinking, he cannot be the best version of himself if he tells little white lies about what's a really important part of his life and who he is. And so that's how I think about ERGs. They have been more important than ever in this last year and a half. The Progressive African American Network has helped me maneuver my communications after George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and making sure that they knew how important it was for leaders to reach out to say, how are you? We have a disabilities network. I think most people think of disabilities as physical disabilities, but within this last 2 years, there have been a lot that we've needed to invest in around mental health, and that's been important. Lastly, and we've got a bunch, I could talk about ERGs forever. We have 18,000 members within Progressive, but our Asian American network, when I communicated with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, I didn't communicate as strongly when the murders happened and the whole xenophobia around the pandemic. And they called me out for it. And I had a session with their board and they said, we need more of you and here's what we need. And I love the fact that they could come to me and say that. And you can always make excuses of this, and this. All I said was, I'm sorry, you're right. Let me work on that. Can you help me? And that's what ERGs do. They make us better leaders. They make us better people. And they make you be able to say, I never saw the world like that. And so to me, they're 9 strong. We work not only within Progressive, but within our communities. Our veterans program, we give 100 cars away each November during Veterans Day to needy veterans. And it's just a really great way to connect with your employee base. The people that are members of the ERG stay longer, they're happier, they're more engaged, and they're promoted more quickly. And so to me, this is something that started with some seeds way back when and has proven to be really successful. And whenever I talk externally or to other companies, I talk about that's a good way to start your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts.
Yeah, great conversation. And now, probably the thing I like to hear more than anything is from CEOs, because it's a core part of your job, is vision. So from each of you, you just have like a minute or a little more to talk about when we want to create equal pay, equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. That's the mission for WBC, and imagine me for choking up on that word. But what is your vision of what can happen in the workplace? So let's start off with Barbara.
Robert, thanks. I'm gonna go back to Trisha's story because this is a piece of advice I give to people all the time. When asked about career advancement, I often tell people, raise your hand. What that means is be confident, raise your hand, and express your interest for an opportunity, no matter your gender. But even more to those who are hiring, my charge to them is to remain open, be objective, consider the qualities that you're looking for, no matter what gender the candidate may have. If we do this, we're going to find we're tapping into the very best talent the world has to offer.
Inspiring. Trisha, your vision.
I feel like Barbara said it well. I think it has to be around authentic allyship and making sure that we lift other people up, whether it's men, women, and any ethnicity, et cetera, all the things we talked about, to eye the people and teach your leadership to do that. All of us are receiving this award, and by the way, it's a huge honor, but it's never lost on me that it takes leaders in our entire organization to embrace this and want to do this and know that that's the right thing to do. And that's really our primary job. And I'm just so glad that we're having this conversation and can't wait to continue it. And I'm an honor to be considered with both Jim and Barbara with this award. So thank you.
Absolutely. Jim, to wrap it up, your vision.
The reason that I focus so much on inclusion and diversity is I think that more than ESG or innovation or building a new plant or some new process, the issue of inclusion and diversity is critical to remaking our workforce, bringing in new talent, and it's going to be what defines the success for our organization in the coming decades. Inclusion and diversity really sets the tone for our culture. And internally, we live every day. The culture eats strategy for lunch every day. And so we couldn't do it without the right people, and inclusion and diversity allows them to come here and be themselves.
And that's what we're trying to do, get people to bring their whole selves to work, build the great organizations, and improve the world with this. So now let's have our summary from Jose Zelstra and tell us where we go from here and what we learned.
Well, thank you all for such an inspiring session. It's hard to take in all this great information and learning. But I really want to start with some common themes that each one of you shared. And that's really about we are going forward, not backwards. So that was a common theme that each one of you really was dedicated to. And the second common theme, I think, was around intentionality and the importance of that. Whether it's intentional goals, 50-50 gender parity, we heard from Jim, a Dow, or doubling leaders of color, a progressive by 2025. But also intentionality around, keeping yourselves and your organization, especially your leaders, accountable, whether it's incorporating inclusion and diversity metrics in the performance of its leaders. The other thing I heard was, really creative programs, role swaps. I really like that. Progressive. If there's not an opening, how are you doing creative ways to expand the skill set of your leaders? So when there is an opening, that they bring, even additional skills than they would have had otherwise. And then around leadership and really the importance of leadership as role models and setting the tone for the organizations, and empowering people to bring their whole selves to work. And I think the importance of that is just, transparency, whether it's leadership on the board or leadership in the C-suite, and the importance of being transparent, both for shareholders as well as customers, but also employees who are looking, for future roles in the organizations. And the other thing I learned was, who can be a leader, can change over time. And an individual that you may not have tapped for a future leader may have the skill sets that you didn't expect and can be put in some of those leadership roles. And I love the supplier diversity conversation and the amount as well as the number of suppliers that are diverse, and I like that in Siemens, the supplier diversity program, that you have that for 6,000 small and diverse organizations, and that they're really growing with the organization as well, a real partnership there. And just in closing, and some of the quotes, if I got it right, if a company doesn't bring value to society, it should not exist. Another quote was, the CEO is the steward of the culture, and the culture eats strategy for lunch. And what I really appreciated too, that there are some positive results out of this pandemic, especially for working moms who have been trying to, fight for flexibility in their work. And I think we've come to a place where that's now a reality, and that's a good thing. So I want to end that on a good note. So thank you all for sharing such great learnings.
Diversified Search was founded in 1974 with the purpose of getting more women into executive positions and diversifying leadership across all industries and sectors. Today, we're proud to say that 75% of our placed candidates in 2020 were women and/or people of color. We are also the most diverse leadership team in the executive search industry among the top 10 largest firms.
Coming up next, a Trailblazer Award winner conversation with Earvin Magic Johnson.
Hello and welcome. I'm Michael Norris and I am a board member of the Women's Business Collaborative. And I have the great privilege of being here today with legendary Earvin Magic Johnson, who really obviously needs no introduction, our five-time national champion, a gold medal winner, Hall of Famer. We can go on and on about all his past exploits in the basketball world, but we're here today and we're going to take some advice and ask some questions and get to know him a little bit better. And the main reason we're here today is to recognize him and let him, have a few words to say. But at the same time, we want to congratulate you on being a Trailblazer Award on behalf of the Women's Business Collaborative. So congratulations, Mr. Johnson.
Well, thank you, Michael. This is really outstanding when I think about the WBC Trailblazer Gender and Diversity Award. It's what I've been about my whole life, my whole career, trying to affect change in urban America, trying to make sure that I highlight women and empower women, but also empower minority businesses and business owners. And making sure that the community is better and that those who live in the inner cities in urban America have a voice. And I become that voice and try to also be that leader. And so thank you for this award. It means a great deal to me. And I just want to say blessings to everybody and thank you, whoever voted for me, whoever thought I deserved this award. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. And with that, we want to talk a little bit about your career since your retirement in was it 1991?
Yes.
The Lakers. Wow. It's amazing. You're still one of the most recognizable faces in the entire world, and you've been, actually separated from basketball for that long. So that has to say something about your business prowess and the things you've done.
Well, Michael, I'm probably recognized more for that now. People probably forget about the 5 NBA championships that I won. And it's more about, really how many businesses I've built and putting people of color to work and changing urban America, but also, the work I've done outside of urban America as well. Part owner of the Dodgers. We just won the World Series last season and, owning the LA Sparks and in the WNBA, as well as LAFC and the MLS soccer, and a number of other businesses, of course. But I've been playing in the sports arena for a long time. And so just trying to diversify my portfolio, and it's been amazing.
Well, you've always done that. You've always been kind of in the forefront of these businesses, and you've been empowering neighborhoods and communities, which is what Magic Johnson Enterprises is all about for since the very beginning. But it wasn't always easy, was it?
No, it wasn't easy. Michael, it's funny because I wanted growth and sustainability. And so when I went to borrow money, they wanted to take the meeting with me. They wanted my autograph and my picture, but they turned me down, right? About 7 or 8 banks turned me down in the beginning. And it wasn't until I went to that last bank and they finally said yes, that I could, grow my business and take it to the next level, scale my business all at the same time. And so there was a lot of ups and downs. Even though I had a track record of success, people did not believe first in me as a businessman, and then they didn't believe in urban America either. Even though you're looking at over $3 trillion spending power of African Americans and Latinos, they still didn't believe in the fact that they could make money, especially big retailers. But we changed that when we did that unbelievable deal with Starbucks and Howard Schultz. And when they saw that Starbucks was successful in urban America, that changed everything. And we were able to put a lot of people to work of color. We were able to give a lot of contracts in terms of suppliers and vendors, women-owned businesses, as well as minority-owned firms. And so it changed not only the Black and brown community, but also, too, it changed people's mind about doing business in the inner cities of America.
Recently, during the COVID crisis, so many minorities and women were impacted so negatively by this crisis. They just weren't, even though they weren't ready. We just weren't ready for it. Can you talk a little bit about that and that unbelievable generosity of your $325 million that you personally have backed? Can you help us with that?
Yes. So when you think about the Paycheck Protection Program, they gave the money to banks and credit unions, and then small business owners, they could apply for the money to get a loan. Well, a lot of the women-owned businesses, a lot of the Black small business owners, as well as Latino small business owners, probably didn't have a relationship with the banks or the credit union, didn't know how to apply for these loans. So we lost a lot of, let me just give you this number. We lost 700,000 small Black business. And that really hurt our community. That meant a lot of people went unemployed and lost their job in Black America. We lost a couple 100,000 Latino small businesses and women-owned businesses. So I said, we can't lose any more because they mean so much to those communities that they serve. So I decided to put up $325 million so that these women-owned businesses, these Latino-owned businesses, as well as Black-owned businesses could get a loan, keep their doors open, and the most important thing, keep their employees employed, right? And so we saved over 20,000 businesses. A lot of them are thriving today because of our loans. And also, it's not only the loans that we gave them, Michael, we also gave them expertise, right? So what is missing when you think about small women-owned businesses, Latino-owned businesses, as well as Black-owned businesses? Not only the capital, but also the expertise on how to grow their business, how they can scale their business, and then last but not least, they want what everybody else wants, which is sustainability. They could be around for a long time. So we were able to give them that type of knowledge, not only write them a check, but give them the expertise to stay in business for a long time.
And you did this all on, your desire to help women, to empower the community, to help minorities, and in all companies, in all genders, and just all people in general. And I remember clearly, once I asked you about the famous no look, behind the back, bounce pass, and I just said, I guess you always expected someone to be there. He said, I remember you telling me the secret behind all that was that you had to have trust.
That's right.
Someone was going to be there. You knew that they were going to be there, and you were going to lay it right up for them. So a lot of the things you've done were way out ahead of the curve, if you will, and people, in the past, not trusting, not having the confidence, and you've been out there and actually invest in these communities and these women organizations and things like that.
Well, again, it's all about trust and loyalty. I think that, Michael, you're spot on. When I think about the women-owned firms that I've worked with over a 35-year span, we trust each other. I know that when I go to them, they're going to get the job done, right? And they trust me as well. And they know when they come to me, I'm going to get the job done. And I think that's what it's all about. And then when you think about the minority community, right? First of all, we already don't trust many organizations, right? We don't trust the
institutions are under a lot of pressure.
Exactly. So, and then it didn't help with all the unrest, George Floyd being murdered. It didn't help the situation. And so now what we're seeing, Michael, today is a lot of CEOs are reaching out to me, and they reached out to me early on, and they're reaching out to me now. And they said, Magic, we want to do something. What do you think we should do? Because we don't know quite what to do. And I said, well, let's start here first. You have this successful business. Well, small Black banks need money, right? Need capital to give out more loans to people in the Black and brown community. So won't you put money into these small Black banks? And Michael, they've done that. I said, historical Black colleges, they need money, right, to build new buildings, to also allow their students to thrive in this technology world, because we are undercapitalized when you think about these historical Black colleges. They put money now into historical Black colleges today. And then I said, let's start with your company. We need, Michael, more board of directors of color. We need more executives of color, more managers in your company of color. And then the employees, if you think they deserve to be promoted, then you promote them, hire more minorities, and then promote them when they deserve it. And then give interns to students of color, because that's what we're lacking and missing as well, right? If it's in your DNA as a leader, as a CEO, as a president of a company, then it would trickle down to everybody else when you think about, Michael, diversity and inclusion. And then the last thing, employees want to feel good about coming to work, right? So we got to make sure that you have this safe environment, this healthy environment for those who are your employees. Make sure you let them and allow them to be who they want to be. Make sure you got a healthy, safe environment for every single employee. But you and I have been about this way before now, right? Now it's big about diversity and inclusion. You and I have been talking about this for probably over 25 years and been about this for over 25 years. So again, I want to say thank you to you, Michael, because the things that we're doing now, that companies are doing now, you and I have been doing this and talking about this for over 25 years.
Well, you have, certainly the public voice of this, and you're very generous. That's a great example of your generosity and leadership. You're always citing the other person, and I humbly accept that and thank you. But it really is a world out here today that the institutions are under pressure. Some of the questions I would have asked you, you just kind of come right to the point with for me here, because it is about a world that is inclusive and fair. And the Women's Business Collaborative is all about equal pay and power and position. And in very recent times, in the last, I'd say 6 months, more female directors and board members and women of color have been on boards, and in the last 10 years put together before that. For that kind of advice and that kind of acknowledgement and that kind of support and the actions that you've taken, that's the reason we are so happy to give you this award. Do you still have it there on your desk?
I still have it. I got it right here. It's not going anywhere. And I'm going to show I'm going to show everybody at my company, but also, people who walk in, they're going to see it. It's going to be front and center. And then last thing I'm going to do is show all my over 10,000 students, and that means half of them are women, that we sent to college through the Magic Johnson Foundation. They're going to see this because, Michael, we can't stop helping and we can't stop teaching these young people as well. And they're going to see this because I want them to know that one day, hopefully, they're going to receive an award like this, affecting change in people's lives. See, you get honors like this. When you give back, you get honors like this. And so God has really blessed me to be in this position. So I want to thank all of you again for this award. Thank you, my friend Michael, for being my friend and mentor for over 25 years. And let's continue to do great things. And I'm here to say I will be anybody's partner out there that want to bring about change and in people's lives. And so let's do some great work.
Well, congratulations on the award, on your lifetime of achievement, the giving back as much as you always have. And I'm very, very proud to have associated on projects and worked with you. You're an inspiration. One day I'll tell you how he actually saved my life. Thank you, thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you
today. Congratulations.
And congratulations to everybody else receiving an award tonight as well.
Thank you, Magic Johnson at the Thasunda Brown Duckett. What amazing trailblazers who have paved a path and acted as role models for their and all diverse communities across the United States. Thank you as well to Dow, Progressives, and Siemens for all you do to create a diverse pipeline, workforce, all the way up to the top echelons of leadership. And what great news to hear how we are progressing to changing leadership in the top echelons in business, the C-suite and the CEOs. We would like to thank with gratitude and deeply our sponsors and our partners, the two groups that make the work we do every day and this summit possible. During this short break, we want to honor our corporate sponsors and our organizational and resource partners. Thank you all for the work you do every day for driving equity and gender diversity in business.
Sodexo, we are committed to gender equity. Our chairwoman, Sophie Bellone, stated, quote, "We believe that gender balance fosters creativity and innovation and ultimately drives better business results," end quote. Less than 10 years ago, female representation in senior leadership roles here at Sodexo was 20%. Today, we are at 32%, moving toward our goal of 40% by the end of 2025. We are proud to prioritize gender equity and to be a partner of the Women Business Collaborative.
Welcome back. And now, a panel discussion on the changing face of leadership, women CEOs, and the C-suite.
And welcome back, everybody. It is wonderful to have you with us. How great was listening to Magic Johnson just a few moments ago. My name is Jane Hanson. I'm a communications coach, and I like to call myself a reformed broadcast journalist. You can smile, everybody, at that. And I'm very excited about the panel that we've got with us today as we talk about the changing face of leadership, women CEOs, and the C-suite. And I will tell you that a lot of my work these days is done with female CEOs or people that work directly below them that are also female. And I'm so very proud and happy to be able to do that. So with us today is Lorraine Harrington, the president and CEO of Catalyst. Kimber Matarazzo, the chairman of the board committee of 200, Dara Klein, managing director of Kaplan Flowers, and Suba Berry, CEO of Ceramount. So welcome to all of you, and I'm very excited to hear your thoughts today because I know you have an awful lot to say on this subject. And Lorraine, I'm going to start with Lorraine and Kimber as we talk about the whole CEO situation and what's going on there. Lorraine, as part of Catalyst, I know that has been a mission for you, that you have been working very hard, even though it seems a little bit like an eternity, to get all these women on to become CEOs. Where are we right now, particularly talking about the Fortune 500s?
Yeah, Jane, thank you so much. And I just want to take a moment before I answer that question to say that, I'm really glad to be coupled with Kimber leading the CEO subcommittee of the Women's Business Collaborative. And we also brought out another committee member, co-chair, Anna Mook from Ascend recently, to really focus on women of color as well. And we have some other partners like Equilar, ELC, and Gender Fair. And together, one of the major things we do is we produce a report that we publish every year. In fact, in October, we're going to be publishing the next edition that really gives the state of play for every aspect of women CEOs, from the Fortune 1000 to the Russell 3000 to private companies and entrepreneurs. And this year, we're particularly focusing on women of color, which is a real critical issue. So the area that Catalyst is really focused on in that work is really the Fortune 500. And it's been a journey on the Fortune 500. This year in particular has been a really good year for women. We now have 8.2% of the CEOs in the Fortune 500 are women, and that is up from 7.4%. That's an 11% increase. And that's a record. There's some really notable CEOs that were added to that. Two women, Black women, Roz Brewer, who runs Walgreens, and Thasunda, I can't pronounce her name, Duckett, who is TIAA. So apologize for that. And so that brings the total of women of color to 5. The rest of them are Asian, and there's no Hispanics. So we still have work to do in that area, specifically women of color. We have our first transgender woman, which is Sue Nabi, who runs Coty. And we have our first woman who's in the top 5, which is Karen Lynch. She's number 4 with CVS. And we have our first woman who runs a really major bank. That's Jane Fraser, and 9 of them are in retail. So we have a lot to celebrate. But if you really step back from it, it is really, we still have work to do. 8.2% is, it's progress. We were at about 5% for 4 or 5 years, and then the last couple of years we've accelerated, but we're not where we want to be. The WBC set a goal that by 2025 we want to be at 15%. And by 2030, we want to be at 20%. If we continue our current course and speed, we'll probably be at 10% at 2025. So, what I'd say is, we can celebrate the successes, we can celebrate the women who've been successful, but we still have a long way to go, and we need to accelerate progress if we really want to get to parity.
Well, what strikes me about what you've just said, Lorraine, is that you're talking obviously about the fortunes, but then you get to the private companies or the smaller companies. And I think, Kimber, you've got a pretty good sense of what's going on there. I'm not sure the numbers are as good there, are they?
Well, believe it or not, there's a lot of women-owned businesses. There's about 40% of women-owned businesses, which is great. Women-led, I should say. The biggest concern is really, are those businesses to scale? So they have difficulty scaling because only about a 2.3%, which is dismal, of money is from VC funding is given to women-led businesses. So it's very hard for them to scale. So a lot of those businesses are very small. And when we look at women of color, 17% of them are new businesses, which is a great number. It's a record all-time high. However, again, only 3% of mature businesses being run by women of color. So the numbers aren't great, lots of work to do. C200 concentrates and works on privately held businesses along with corporate. A lot of the women that Lorraine mentioned are C200 members in the Fortune 500. So we're fortunate that we have the balance of delivering, and extending programs to women in leadership, both in public and in private sectors.
Well, so which leads me to another thought, Lorraine, and I know that you and Catalyst were really instrumental in helping create and helping kind of come up with the accountability, the standards, that sort of thing, of the Gender Equality Index, the GEI. And I'm curious how you think that, because now the numbers are out there and people can actually see them. How do you think that's affected the ability to get more women as CEOs?
Well, you've got to measure what matters. And the fact the numbers are there is critical. Not only the number of women CEOs, because that's pretty public, especially in the public companies, people know what those numbers are. But as you get down and you look at representation through the organization, those are the numbers that are really critical to measure and make apparent. Because we know, and the conversation that those of you who are listening to it with the CEOs, they mentioned that people are hiring in many organizations, especially retail and finance, 50% women. Sometimes it's more than 50% women. But when you get to middle management, you're 25. When you get to the top of pyramid, we're under 10%. So the numbers tell the story of what's really going on. So we've been really advocating for transparency so that we can start really understanding the game. But that is not the only thing that's going to move the needle. I like to talk about 4 areas that are important. First of all, accountability at the top, at the CEO level and at the board level. And when we heard from the CEOs that won the awards, we know that they are really committed with intentionality to move forward. And that's why they're making progress. Number 2, you got to measure what matters. So you need to measure at every level in the organization, and then you got to hold people accountable for moving and making changes to those measurements. And if you make them public, then they're more transparent. So you can measure them and not make them public internally and externally, but more and more that's becoming a requirement. Employees are demanding it, investors are demanding it. They're demanding it because they know it creates a better environment and they get better results. Number 3, you got to create policies and practices that help companies do things like sponsorship or give people line jobs. A lot of the things that were talked about in that conversation, people need to move around to the line jobs. And lastly, you got to create a culture that really does not have bias, that allows people to bring their full self to work, that allows people to hire and promote people, not in their image, but people who are different than them. So there's a lot of things, but it starts, the numbers tell the story, and that's where you have accountability.
And that actually leads to a lot of peer pressure, particularly with those public companies. I'm sure you'd agree with that. But now when you get to the privates, there's not that same kind of peer pressure, but there's other issues that might be at work, like people want to buy products from companies that promote strong women, et cetera. So Kimber, take me through this from the private company viewpoint, and the same issues that Lorraine just brought up about accountability and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, it's all the same issues that Lorraine brought up, because it's really the onus is on the CEO and the board to make sure they put the programs in place in the company. But when you look at the private sector, one of the key things is, and we really advocate for this at C200, is how do we get these female owners, these entrepreneurs who are driving their businesses, spending most of their time doing that, the support that they need through funding, through advocacy, through sponsorship. We want to get them involved in communities and networks that are going to help advance them. So even when you mentioned, supplier network, there are a lot of women organizations that will help them with their supply network, help them get into companies. So it's really, how do they work that network and have advocates that help them and advance their business?
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it. So here's a question for you. Then what about the male CEOs? What are they doing to leave a great legacy? Kimber, got any thoughts on that?
Male CEOs, we need them, right? That's the most important thing. We need them. So when you say legacy, if they're exiting from their position, we hope that they at least look at candidates or suggest candidates that are diverse and who are women also. It's important to do that. But as management replaces in an organization, especially when a new CEO comes in, that is the time to really say, how can we put in new faces, right? How can we change this? How can we intentionally do it? We've heard it through the panels today. I think the key is really making sure at least we get the candidates available to interview. And that's where the networks come in. If you have a great network, you know who those people are, you know other people who will know them, and there's candidates, there's people out there who are qualified. It's not about qualifications. There are people waiting in the wings to be able to be put into those positions.
Well, I have to tell you, though, that I have a couple of very close friends that are have strong recruiting companies that are recruiting for the top of the top, cream of the top jobs. And they find a lot of women feel like they've not been given the opportunity to take on the responsibility. And so therefore, they're out of there. So how do you deal with that kind of thought? And I can see you, Lorraine, have a thought on this.
Well, in the Fortune 500, to a large extent, you're hiring someone who's come up through the organization. So that CEO and that board and the policies and practices they put in place are going to be critical for whether the talent pool, when it comes to succession, has women in it. And unfortunately, the numbers are not really very good. Maybe 20% of the time, they'll have a woman who's really a strong candidate for succession. But that really is incumbent on the CEO to develop that pipeline. And that can be done with real intentionality. For example, Jane Fraser, who just became CEO of Citi, she was moved to line jobs that gave her the opportunity to compete. And, we just heard about Teresa, her story about she moved from, in her case, from line to staff, but that also broadened her experience. That was the CEO who was having that conversation with her, who understood what she needed to be broadened out so that she could take that CEO job. Those types of discussions, those types of intentionality need to happen in the organization. And then, coupled with, women stepping forward to take the risk to take those jobs as well. And we heard that story from her. But, I think that CEOs today, those like the ones who won the award, are intentionally doing that work to make sure they have a diverse pipeline that then becomes the final candidates for that CEO job. And it doesn't happen. You don't wake up. If you wake up and decide, okay, who am I going to look at? And you have all men in your C-suite, you're not going to solve this problem. You've got to look and do it over a 5-year period.
And is that as easy? It's not as easy to do, though, in smaller private companies, right, Kimber? Because there just aren't as many employees, and there aren't as many people in, moving up into those management roles.
Right, the spaces don't open. So that is why, privately held companies, if it's women-led, women-founded, they should be really putting in pipeline opportunities for the women in their company and helping them exit their company, helping them start their own businesses, helping them get funding. So it's really, it goes back to that education and giving women the opportunity.
So I want to move on to Dara and Suba, but before I do, a couple of words from each one of you, Kimber and Lorraine, just like this, 1 or 2 words for action that you think you want to, what's the main message you want to give to somebody right now?
I'd say intentionality.
Sorry?
Intentionality. That you need to go forward with intentionality in order to make change, especially at the top of the organization, the CEO and the board. If we want to make progress, it needs to be with intentionality.
And Kimber?
You have a strong community and network that gets you into those positions, and being intentional, like Lorraine said, if you have that community, you go to that community and say, this is what I want, help me get there, and put a plan together. So it's important to have those strong women and men both around you.
Look, I want to say one thing, which is back when I started my career in the broadcast business, women, there weren't a lot of women, and women didn't support each other very well. And I'm sure we've all had similar experiences at the beginning of our careers. I believe that has totally changed now, but still women need to support women. And if just a thought of how do you do that? Kimber, I think that's what you were alerting to when you talked about it.
Exactly. It's getting in communities, it's developing its opportunities. I think that women have to support each other, and I think they are. We see so much of it. You see these women on this panel who I've gotten to know in these last 2 years who have supported me and helped me through things. And we're here for each other. And it's all about opportunity and making sure that, your fellow sisterhood has that opportunity.
All right.
Yeah, I also want to just chime in. I spent most of my career in Silicon Valley. I was a tech executive and entrepreneur, and we had a networking organization in Silicon Valley made of women. It was, it's now called Watermark. It was called the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs and Executives. And that was my go-to organization where we supported each other and helped each other in an environment where there were not that many women, in these small startups. So, that was a great vehicle for me to really learn and grow in that environment.
And probably got you to what you're doing today, I guess.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's now go to Dara and Suba, because we've been talking about the word pipeline has come up a lot here, about pathways to the C-suite. So what does that look like in 2021? And how they changed, and especially in the last year and a half when we've all been through hell?
Well, Jane, honestly, we really need to call out the elephant in the room. And everybody talks about running P&Ls and how that's the pathways to the C-suite. And why is this a persistent challenge for women, for white women and women of color? And so we know that everyone in the C-suite, at least 1 in 5 are white women, but 1 in 25 are women of color in the C-suite. But 80% of these women hold either HR, legal, or marketing roles that are non-revenue generating, non-P&L roles, and therefore they are not pathways to the C-suite. And we know that P&L has always been and will always be, at least for the time being, the pathway to the C-suite. And if women are blocked, or we are not encouraged to take on P&L roles, how are we going to improve these numbers? And frankly, from a talent sourcing standpoint, women are minimally represented with P&L responsibility. And so how are we going to improve the numbers for these roles? And we just, as search partners, we really don't have a strong pipeline of women who have P&L responsibilities who we can put in front of our clients. We know that hiring organizations need to do a better job within their own organizations, within their own four walls, of getting women this type of responsibility. So how can we do it? We need to create the opportunities for people from different parts of the business to get the P&L responsibilities. We need to rotate them through different areas of the business to get them more experience, and we need to give them the opportunity to give them stretch assignments. We also, and as it's been said, we need to educate our young girls and then our young women on the importance of P&L and on the importance of STEM, so that we are able to put them in a position to take on this responsibilities. And we should also, it was said earlier today, we need to encourage our women to self-advocate. We need to encourage us all that we are worthy, we can speak, we should speak up. And leaders should encourage us to take risks and these stretch assignments, and to give us advice and to support us, and emphasizing that this experience is going to help us move forward. And we need to provide the example that it can be done. And then finally, and also most importantly, as it's been said before today, we need to enlist our white male leaders to support women and women of color in the organizations, and they have to examine their own actions and their own behaviors and lead by example. And to really self-examine, to try to minimize the sort of old boys network that once was.
So what I hear you saying is that it almost sounds like there's just this real bias towards putting women in those jobs, even if they're fully capable of handling them. Is that correct?
You're so right, Jane. Dara is spot on, and we have research to back it up. Sarah Mount's findings we did a study in 2019. It was called Gender Gap at the Top, and it explored this very specific topic as to why don't they seem to know how to navigate and put themselves in positions where they can actually get to these C-suite type roles. Firstly, it starts off at the entry level. The kinds of sales jobs, other jobs that are client facing, typically women don't raise their hands and step forward to them. So the ability for you to do a rotation through a sales role in early career can make such a huge difference, because you know exactly how revenues are produced. So from that perspective, we think a P&L experience is important, but it doesn't have to start with a big P&L role. It can start off with roles like in sales. Think about client-facing roles in early career. But it's still, we've found so many other different ways to get to it, but still getting that P&L experience and getting that rotation seems to be critical.
So when you're thinking about that P&L experience, what strikes me is sometimes those are also the jobs that require a lot more time in the office, or a lot of maybe traveling, certainly in the past, that kind of thing. I'm just curious about whether that means women who want to take those roles have to make some kind of a real choice about their family or the jobs, and if that gets in the way.
So a couple of very interesting things. I originally came from financial services, and, global rotations in jobs were so important. If you had global rotations, that actually positioned you for a bigger role. Mm-hmm. And very often women will say, well, by the time I get offered this global rotation opportunity, that's bang in the middle of my childbearing, child-rearing years. And that's not when I can go around the world to other jobs. So we changed that to say, why can't you give these early opportunities when they're still new in the business? Why do you have to wait till years 7 to 10? Why not in years 3 and 4? And I think that sort of mentality and mindset change within organizations will allow women, long before they get to those childbearing, child-rearing years, to experience these things. And on the part of the women, I would say to you, don't opt out early. just because you say, oh my God, I'm probably going to be married, I'm going to have children, so I'm going to opt out of it now. Lead with a yes and, not with a no but.
Mm-hmm. Well, that which leads us to the point that flexibility becomes extremely important. And we all know that flexibility sometimes is very difficult to get. So how does a woman attain that? Because again, going back to the people I know that are recruiting like crazy and have many more jobs available than candidates currently, the number one reason that women have, in the great resignation that they're finding is the lack of flexibility. So you're talking about the need for flexibility. So now what do you do?
Well, I think the need for flexibility has to be across the board, because if we're going to talk about equity, it's flexibility for men and for women. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is not just a women's issue. This is an issue for us all.
And Dara, to your point, the next generation, the millennials, the Gen Z, they are forceful about wanting that for themselves, not just the women, but the men too. So you guess what has happened? It used to be maternity leave. And then we looked at these companies that offered paternity leave and said, wow, this is great. Guess what? Almost 60% of the companies are now offering gender neutral leave for moms and dads. And that includes, think about the inclusion for same-sex couples and the likes. So I think that this next generation is forcing corporate America to rethink this notion of flexibility being just a woman's issue.
Mm-hmm. I see you nodding your head, Lorraine. Did you want to throw something in here?
Yeah, I think, and Jim Fettering mentioned this, that we are at a real moment of change in the nature of work around flexibility. In fact, I was reading a whole memo that went from this major Fortune 500 company around complete flexibility for work. And flexibility is location, it's time, and how we work. It's all that dimensions. The things that Catalyst and all of our organizations are advocating for many, many years is becoming a reality. And it's being driven by the employees. Because as we say, this generation is thinking differently. I'm actually sitting in Seattle with my son who just had his second child, and they are both at home. He has a 3-month leave from Microsoft. So, that is becoming the new norm. Flexibility on where and how you work is becoming the new norm, and it's going to be demanded. And the reason why these companies are doing this is because they have a talent shortage. They need to attract and retain the talent. It is being driven by this generation. So while the pandemic affected women mostly because the sectors that they were in were most highly affected, as we come back to this new normal, there's going to be greater opportunity, in my opinion, and we need to that, and we need to get those companies to understand that if they lean into that, they can attract and retain the best talent wherever they are and how they want to work.
Which leads me to believe that maybe these numbers are just going to skyrocket the moment all those millennials get in charge.
I hope so. They're already getting there. The millennials are already in the driver's seat, and that is here to stay. The other part is this notion of seeing alignment between values and what they expect and what the companies offer. And when they don't see that alignment, this generation says, I'm walking out the door.
Correct.
And with a talent shortage on one side and these employees wanting to see action and commitment on the parts of their companies, this cannot be lip service anymore.
The Edelman Trust Index, for the first time, employees were more important than the shareholders in terms of where the CEO and the board is focused. So the reason why they want transparency, the reason they're leaning into this is because it's driven by the employees and attracting and retaining the talent. So that is really powerful. That is changing the world. And we, my job running Catalyst is to make sure that everyone's leaning into that opportunity for change so that we can make progress for women and really for everyone, as we talked about, because everyone is benefiting. My son is benefiting from, because he's with his, 1-week-old daughter right now. That's something that when I went to work was not an opportunity for my husband. In fact, I went to work back to work in 8 weeks and 6 weeks because I was afraid that, you know, culturally, I would not advance my career if they had any idea that I'd actually had a baby.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think we've all kind of experienced that through the course of our careers, which leads me back to this notion then of the great resignation about what happened during COVID, all the women who left their jobs, because many of them, those women of childbearing age now, are millennials. So it almost seems like a discrepancy in a certain respect, because if they have that flexibility, then why are they leaving?
Well, there are a couple of reasons that I see as you know, causes for that. And I'm going to actually drill down and focus on multicultural women, because I want to call out the fact that in another 20, 25 years, our country is going to be minority majority, and 50% of that population is going to be women. So multicultural women are keys. And we talk about multicultural women, you know, leaving the workforce post-pandemic in numbers that are so enormous that corporations should be shuddering. So from why? And you look at the data, multicultural women start out ambitious, 25% more likely to aspire to senior roles as compared to white women. In fact, Black women are right at the top of that ladder. They are so ambitious about wanting, you know, P&L role experiences, etc. So they have expressed that loud and clear. And yet all of those fall by the wayside. And if you ask Kimber, she will tell you that the largest number of small businesses are started by multicultural women. And you may ask yourself, why is that? If they're so ambitious when they come to corporate America, why are they starting businesses? Because there isn't a sense of inclusion for them. They feel like they are out on the fringes. They do not have the networks. They do not have the support structures, the sponsors. So when you really think about it, they're leaving not because they're not successful there, but because they haven't found a sense of belonging there. And they want to determine their own destiny. They go off and they start their business. That is what corporate America should be focusing on and figuring out how to solve for. Finding a way to hold on to their multicultural talent, because the drain they're having on that side is only going to accelerate and get worse unless some intervention or some tool is put into place to fix it.
Kimber,
I want to talk about the numbers a bit here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, because, you know, these numbers on the C-session, we talked to some economists that really drilled on it. The reason why so many women left is a sectoral issue. Retail, caregiving jobs, hospitality jobs, those are the jobs that were lost. They were particularly lost by women of color. Those are the people who occupy those lower level jobs. That's why they left. If we actually did comparisons, they didn't leave because of the childcare issues. You know, most of them can't afford to leave because of the childcare issues. That's the frank reality of it. They have, you know, families who help them. But, you know, as they think about going back, also looking at other alternatives. It's not, we know we have this big resignation. It's because people are reevaluating their whole situation right now. So, and as you know, Suba just pointed out, multicultural women are also feeling more alienated. And if they have an inclusive leader, a manager who's working with them, who understands their circumstances, they're much more likely to stay with the organization or come back to the organization. If they're feeling alienated, they're going to go out and try something else themselves. So, you know, I just wanted to debunk this a little bit because I really wanted to understand what was really going on here. It is true that it's been a real struggle for women and for everyone in this child care issue, but it's not the main reason why they left the workforce. They got laid off because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So Jane, both Lorraine and Suba, great input. But really, when you look at the numbers, just as Suba said, 17% of new businesses that are started are women of color, and only 15% of them are white women. So it's that they don't fit in corporate America anymore because these corporations are not changing, and that's what it's going to take, is if they want those great leaders and want them in their organizations, they have to be flexible, they have to be inclusive. They, you know, it doesn't have to take having to be a baby, have a baby to be able to take time off and have that kind of work schedule that you want. And These millennials and these younger generations are demanding it. They're smart. They're saying, I'm not going to work in corporate America. I'm going to start my own business, and they're going out and doing it.
You know, Jane, I want to interject here because I think, Kimber, this is such an important point here. The millennials and the pandemic have created a perfect storm here. And we have seen some outstanding CEOs, the CEO of TIAA, I mean, so incredibly inspiring. And she said this morning, we have to decide, I wrote this down, we have to decide that we want to do more. So here's the difference. We have some CEOs like this incredibly inspiring and talented woman, and there are men like her too, inspiring. They're doing the right thing, but it's because they've decided that they want to do more. And so we have to continue to look for leadership who wants to do more and who wants to make change. We, you know, the sponsorship, we know that that is the case. We need to encourage our women and our young women to take on more technical roles, STEM, stretch assignments, all of that. But our leaders need to take accountability, and they have to decide that they can do more too.
But I want to get back to how you started this conversation, Dara, which was talking about P&L and that experience, because if that's still going to be the cornerstone, making the money, then how, companies have to make money or they're not going to exist.
So true.
So how do you change that chain of thought when you still got to have the bottom line of being profitable?
It's not going to change overnight, but if our executive leadership does not reach out into their own organizations and start from the early stages, bringing on people of color because they know that it is better for their organization, because they're going to make more money by having a more diverse population included in their organization, and then make the decision on saying, yes, you can, and include them and teach more people P&L responsibility. It doesn't have to be a select few. So I think that that executive leadership needs to reach into their own organizations and start much, much earlier. By the middle management, I think that that's a tall order.
Right. So what about pressure from the outside? Because we all know that millennials, for example, we've talked a lot about them, are all about sustainability, being climate change, being environmentally correct, there's all kinds of pressure coming in. How much can that actually help and force these top executives to change the way they're doing business?
Well, I think that's an important point, Jane, because we're forgetting about the consumer, right? These millennials are also consumers, and they vote with their wallets. And they will start looking at corporations, and if corporations are not doing what they need to do to satisfy the need of these millennials and be more diverse, be more inclusive, be more sustainable, they won't buy their products. And we're already starting to see that. And that's why these leaders in corporate America need to take close attention and say, what can I do to make sure that we satisfy our audience, right? Our clients, our customers.
Yeah. I have a 31-year-old who she's not buying things from places where she doesn't like how they operate. And she's very firm about that. And I'm willing to bet, Lorraine, that your son and daughter-in-law with the new baby and all the things you can buy for babies, they're probably watching that closely.
Absolutely. Yep. You're right, Jane. I think the other piece that we shouldn't miss out is, I know Dara called out the middle managers. They have an important role to play here, because in our research, one piece that stood out for us was when you had an empathetic manager, that made all the difference between whether you wanted to quit your job because you couldn't take one more, tiny little piece of extra that was put on your lap because of everything that you were doing at home. So for women, especially for multicultural women, the ability to have an empathetic manager makes a difference. So the new calling cards, the language of leadership You now have empathy and vulnerability. Those are the two qualities that people are laying out there. And these are innately things that women naturally do well. So what is the other side of it? What else needs to happen so that we can continue to be empathetic and vulnerable? And I would say to you, the opportunity to be allowed to fail and pick yourself up, where failure does not become career defining and career ending. And the challenge with being one of the few in whether it's a C-suite or the CEO role is all eyes are on you. And you don't have that opportunity. There are plenty of mediocre male leaders who fail and are given the opportunity to pick themselves up and try again.
Yeah, I see them failing upwards.
Yep. No, we need to make failure is the way we learn. And yet we make it so very difficult, whether it's a Jane Fraser, whether it's a Thasunda, whoever it is, we have our eyes on them and we're looking for every step they take. And I'm going to say to you, failure needs to be acceptable.
Yep, I couldn't agree with you more. What just happened? Did we just lose you? Oh, there you are.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You were getting very emotional there. I wanted to see your face.
I've always said it's if failing is the way you learn, why is it that we make it so difficult for women to be able to do that? Why do they have to be these embodiments of, I have to be 90% ready for a job before I raise my hand. I have to do it well. And we are so hard on ourselves and on each other. I'm going to say to you, we need to make it acceptable for women to be able to take that risk, come up short, pick themselves up, try again, and succeed.
Yep.
And that's particularly true of women of color. They feel that they have to be perfect in everything. They have to fit into the exact environment. But I also wanted to pick up on something Suber said. Catalyst just issued research last week about the importance of empathy, and particularly the first line manager and how they can influence that, and actually the senior leadership, and particularly with women of color. The intent to stay. It's incredible the difference. If you have an empathetic culture and an empathetic leader, people want to stay. And that's been true through the pandemic, because empathy means understanding the situation you're in, adjusting the workload, being flexible. I believe that that the type of leadership that women have traditionally been really good at, inclusive leadership, that is empathetic, that is curious, that listens, is the type of leadership we're going to need in the new hybrid environment we're talking about. And we're going to see more women in leadership because those are the skills that are going to be necessary to be successful. So this command and control, power, just do what I say approach to thing that's out. This is what's in. And I think we're going to see more women leaders in that environment.
It's interesting you say that, because in my coaching, and again, I coach a lot of C-suite executives, I've had them actually come to me during the pandemic and said, help me, teach me how to be more empathetic, teach me how to be vulnerable. What are the words I use? How do I become that person? And I said to them, well, who are you in your private life? What do you care about? And we literally go through some very kind of, it's a tough learning curve for some of them, because they have to literally say, I'm allowed to show how vulnerable I am. And I'm allowed to have that kind of compassion for the people that work for me. This is something that COVID has actually taught us and brought it really to light, which I think could make some huge changes in the way that people manage.
And Jane,
It's a skill. It's like a muscle. It's like, learning how to do push-ups. Day one, you can only do one, but if you keep at it, you can do 50. So they need to think of it that way, and to gradually build that muscle up.
Exactly. Dara, you were about to pipe in.
I was going to say, building on that as well, they need to admit that they don't have all the answers, that change is really not easy for any of us. And they need to say, I need help too. And so by modeling that behavior, more people are going to follow them. But but the older school leadership is afraid to put that out there, afraid to be vulnerable, certainly afraid to say, I don't know.
Yes, that's true, but I think they're learning that that's going to have to
One
change.
step at a time, or their staff is going to leave them.
Right.
Their staff is because they can go somewhere else now.
So the WBC is committed to this goal of 10% of all women in the C-suite will be women of color by 2030, and 25% of candidates assessed for C-suite roles are women by 2025. How attainable are these goals? And where are we?
They're attainable. So this team will tell you, we've gone over and over on whether we think we can meet those numbers or not. And at the WBC, there's so many organizations, I believe it's 55 now, that are working to achieve this and working from, from the beginning to the end, and making sure that women have those touch points and everybody's accountable all along the way to make sure we get more and more women in those CEO roles. So we're pretty confident that we can do it.
And here's some other good news, Jane.
Yeah.
We are working, we have a work stream. In fact, this group right here, we are working on a work stream that is in place to focus on the pipeline to get to the C-suite. And we are putting together a white paper, an accessible white paper that includes best practices of women who have advanced through the pipeline. We're going to be interviewing women who have successfully moved through the pipeline. We're going to be talking to sponsors, and we're going to listen to their stories, and we're going to share them, and we're going to talk about critical networking relationships and P&L opportunities, and we're going to share a toolkit, and we're going to share the pathways to get there. And that's the good news that WBC is offering. And you're looking at the group who's preparing it.
Guys, yay, hooray.
Thank you.
I love that. And I think that will be extremely helpful. But the other thing that strikes me is we really need to work with these young women before they even hit their careers.
Yep.
And college, even before college. And I'm talking about all women across the board, no matter what their ethnicity, no matter what their background is, to be able to teach them that they too can do it and help give them some tools to accept failure, because we've talked about failure a lot today, and to accept what, to be able to understand what they need to do, how to advocate for themselves, because I think sometimes it's really hard for some young women. So how do you do that? How do you do that beyond?
I'll tell a personal story I'll tell it really quick. I think it starts in the home. So when I was young, my father used to sit with me while he balanced his checkbook. And he would show me at 7, 8 years old how to balance a checkbook. And, when I became of age, and I immediately learned to balance my checkbook. So it starts young. And I ask all the parents out there to work with their daughters. And, like Lorraine just shared, she has a son who had a daughter. You have to work with your daughters and show them at a very young age, these are the things that they can do, and start educating them at a young age.
I think that's
great point. It's a great point, Kimber. And I think the other piece of it is we as professional career women, I know that mentorship and sponsorship has been talked about, but the ability to cascade that down, who you mentor within an organization, asking them who they mentor, and making sure that this kind of pattern of serial mentorship becomes core to what we do for each other. And so if each generation is there paying it forward to the generation behind them, then you can see how that can go to high school students, to middle school students, and grade students. I think it's never too early to start.
I also think we need to encourage more women to go into STEM professions, especially to have strong digital literacy so they can compete for the jobs of the future. And, places like the Girl Scouts and Girls Who Code, and there's a lot of organizations that are really helping with that. One story is, I have a computer science degree that I got actually in the late 70s. And at the time, there were more women getting computer science degrees than there are now. And it was when the PC went into the home and the boys started gaming, it became a cultural thing that was not cool for girls. But so we need to change that cultural parameter and get girls involved in the tech field, because almost every job is going to require a certain degree of literacy to be successful.
Exactly. Well, we have exactly 2 minutes left. So what I want to do is just go around and have each one of you, if you could just give some final thoughts, a little inspiration for our audience, and what you see for the future. Derek, can we start with you? Do you mind?
Of course, not at all. I'm going to really encourage all of you to self-advocate. Be confident. You are worthy. You have a lot to offer. And then I'll say to our men, stand up for your women colleagues, all women. We need you. We need to bring more women, all women, but especially women of color, into the fold, and we need the men to speak up for us.
Thank you. Amber?
I encourage everybody to look at their social network and take a look at that network and say, how diverse is my network? And and if it's not, how can we bring in more diverse members into the network?
I love that. Lorraine?
I want to encourage leaders, CEOs, people in the C-suite to really lean into the change that's happening now in the nature of work, and to seize the moment to create a more equitable, inclusive, and fulfilling workplace for everyone.
And Suba.
Thank you. I actually did something in this past year and a half that I think was a great lesson for me, but it could be for others too. I keep it's not a diary, it's just a chronology of all the appointments I have and what I've done, what worked, what didn't work, and the likes. And I decided last year to call this my crisis journal, because I realized that when I aggregated what I took away and learned about myself, how I reacted, I realized that it really turned into outlining what my superpower was. And so the ability for people to take their mistakes, successes, and failures and turn it on its head to say, what did you learn from it and what are you going to do about it? And then go speak to your manager about it at work and say, I'm ready for that next promotion, that next bigger job, because look at what I did. This last year and a half was incredibly difficult, but here's how I came through it and here's what I learned. And I guarantee you, we can run circles around what they expect of us in the workplace.
I love that. What a great way to end. Thank you so much, Dara, Lorraine, Kimber, Suba. Go to your closing dinner now, Suba. You have permission to leave.
Thank you.
It was really lovely to chat with all of you. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll say goodbye for now.
Wells Fargo is committed to fair and equitable compensation and to ensuring that our pay practices are consistent regardless of race, ethnicity, or gender.
Coming up, we will meet our next Trailblazer Award recipient, United States Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo.
What an honor to introduce Karen Lynch, the CEO and president of CVS Health. And we all know it, 300,000 colleagues transforming healthcare. And we know it. We visit the 10,000 pharmacy locations, the 1,000 mini clinics, and we know they're serving 34 million people with health insurance products. It is amazing to see Karen as CEO, and how fitting as a transformation leader for Karen to introduce our Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo. Why? Well, the Secretary of Commerce comes from Rhode Island, and CVS with that base and friendship in the great state of Rhode Island. With that, yes, a treat and a tribute, Karen Lynch. Karen?
Thank you so much, Edie. I'm excited to be here today, and it's my pleasure to introduce the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo. Madam Secretary, It's so nice to see you.
It's fantastic to be with you, Karen. You're an incredible leader and a good friend, and I'm really excited to be here with you.
Well, thank you for that. You know, during your time as governor, you know, CVS Health was so proud to work so closely with you to strengthen Rhode Island's workforce. You now hold yet another prestigious position, representing American business interests here and globally. And so first, I just want to say thank you for your continued leadership to empower businesses to hire, grow, and trade. And second, as you've been supporting business leaders, you've been a strong advocate for women and for diversity. So thank you so much for your distinguished advocacy and, most importantly, action. Now it is truly my honor to present you with the Women's Business Collaborative's 2021 Trailblazer Award. This award recognizes your commitment to advancing gender equality, diversity, and to increasing opportunities for women in business. So my heartfelt congratulations on this well-deserved, well-earned recognition. And thank you again for all that you're doing to make our country stronger and more competitive than ever.
Thank you, Karen. It is a beautiful award that I have received from you, and it is my great honor to have this award. WBC 2021 Trailblazer Gender and Diversity Award. And I want to say thank you. I will display it in my office with pride. As you know, this work matters to me, just as it matters to you. And I did everything I could as governor to provide opportunities for women, whether they were working for me in the government or women in the workforce in Rhode Island. And I hope to do that now in my new job at an even greater scale. Because we all know that women in particular were hit the hardest during this pandemic. Millions have dropped out of the workforce, and that's not okay. It's not okay for those women, and it isn't okay for our economy. So I will continue to be in this new role very focused on workforce development, workforce training, and making sure that everybody, regardless of gender, regardless of zip code, regardless of the color of their skin, has a chance for good paying jobs and a decent career. And by the way, I will comment that my job is made much easier because of visionary principled leaders like you and employers like CVS that are deeply committed to creating jobs and doing it in a way that is equitable. So this, you know, like you, I've received many awards. This one is special. And I have a lot of passion for it, and I can't thank you enough for the award.
I'm so thrilled to be able to give you this award, and I can't thank you enough. I look forward to continuing to work with you and alongside of you for hiring for equity and, you know, making women have much more opportunities. And I really look forward to our conversation. So let's get started. First, let me ask you, what are your priorities as secretary?
So my overall overarching priority is to do everything I can in my department, in my role, to enhance American competitiveness. You know, there's so much talk now about China. There's talk about, you know, has America fallen behind? The truth of it is, we need to compete. We need to invest in ourselves in order to run faster, be more innovative, and compete. So American businesses can compete on a global stage and American workers can compete. So that means investing in our infrastructure, as you and I have talked about. I'm on the president's jobs cabinet and working daily with Congress to pass the infrastructure bill. In order to compete, we need better roads, better bridges. Every American needs broadband, better infrastructure, et cetera. I'm going to have a big focus on worker training. There's a huge skills gap between the number of Americans who have digital skills, cyber skills, cloud computing skills, and the number that is needed, you know, the demand by American industry for those skills. So I want to work in my capacity and to close that gap and make sure that folks have those skills. One area that I'm particularly focused on that is a top priority is semiconductors, which might sound boring, except every single business in America relies upon semiconductors for what they do. And right now we don't make enough in America, which puts us in a very vulnerable position. So that it is a top priority of mine in order to make that supply chain, deeper, more resilient, and frankly, made here in America.
Well, if there's anyone that can accomplish all those things, I know it's you. As you think about gender equity, diversity, and a more inclusive business environment, what are some of the challenges, that you see, especially as it relates to women in the workforce?
Well, one of the initiatives that I'm working hard on is what we're calling the care economy. So women can't go to work and be productive if they can't find or afford childcare or care for their elderly loved ones. I am at work today, productive, because my 90-year-old mother has a great care team, and my kids have great care and great schools. And now I'm lucky because I have the means to afford that. But the truth is, millions and millions and millions of women are struggling to re-enter the workforce or be productive in the workforce because this country's care infrastructure is inadequate. I just read a story the other day about a woman who had to give up her job as a paramedic, which was her career, which she loved, because she couldn't find and afford childcare. So she took a job as an Uber driver. She had an autistic son, so she could keep her son in the car with her all day while she drove the Uber. So what's my point? My point is, right now, we have 2.5 million women who've dropped out of the workforce during COVID. We have millions of women who are turning down promotions at work, all because of an inadequate infrastructure for home care, child care, pre-K, and elder care. And so now that I'm in a position to have an impact on that, I'm working on that, and I'm trying to educate members of Congress and even some in the business community that this does matter. Because if you want to tap into the massive potential of half of America's workforce, which is women, you have to get real about the realities and invest in the care economy.
I love that. And the care economy is really critical. And I applaud you for really pushing that agenda forward. And I'll look forward to, thinking about and creating ways to work with you on that. Tell me, Secretary, a little bit more about what your message today would be to aspiring businesswomen, and how do we empower them and elevate them in their careers? Yes.
So I would say, by the way, I should ask you this question because you have had a distinguished decades-long career of doing exactly that. If every leader did what you do, that would be, excellent. Because my point is, it's on us. It's on us who have achieved these positions of leadership to be there for the women who work for us, look for opportunities for them, look for opportunities to promote them, look for opportunities to support them, and to do that in kind of an institutional way. And so I cannot emphasize that enough. You have to have initiatives that find talented women early in their career and help them, find projects that are high profile and challenging so they can take on those projects and then support them so they can be successful. I think it has to be rooted in the work. Mentorship is important, but really it's seeking out women who want to succeed and are, talented, and putting them in positions to succeed. And so when, you look around your board table, there ought to be a third or more women. When you look around your executive, the C-level positions and the executive vice president positions, you ought to see women. And if you don't, it means you have more work to do, because I guarantee you, they're there in your organization. You have to find them, promote them, cultivate them, train them, and, highlight them. And so that's what we all have to do. And by the way, this is not charity work. I promise you, your organization will be more productive, more effective, and higher performance if you have more diversity at every level of that organization.
I couldn't agree more. And there's a big component of sponsorship, right? It's incumbent upon us that we sponsor women throughout the organization, take risks and take chances on them. So, as you think about your former role as governor of Rhode Island and now Secretary of Commerce, you have been an outstanding leading advocate for everything from STEM to closing the digital divide across the nation that you talked about earlier. How do we maintain the momentum and win in our expanding technology footprint?
I think it has to start early. So I really do worry that as a country, we're not producing enough talent in, what I would call digital skills. If you look at the demand, industry's demand for people with digital skills, technical skills, it is skyrocketing. Every single business, you see this even at CVS, is becoming a digital business, a tech-enabled business. So one of the things I did as governor was, don't laugh, but we made sure that every kindergartner in Rhode Island, in every public school, had some computer science. Every kid in every grade, in every public school, starting in kindergarten and every grade through 12th grade, took a version of computer science. And I think that initiative and initiatives like that to expose people to cybersecurity, digital design, cloud computing, engineering, software engineering, computer science is really essential. And also if you do it in the public school system and you do it earlier, you will get kids of color, you will get girls, you will get kids in, poor neighborhoods, which is the right thing to do. And frankly, the only way that we're going to meet the talent demand that our industry needs to be competitive.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're building the pipeline and thinking about the future. You're at the WBC. They're promoting for more women leaders in the tech sector. How do you think we need to further that mission? And I think you spoke a lot about it in the last answer, but curious if there's more we could be doing in the tech sector.
I really think it has to be more intentional. This is doable, right? Like if you're serious about this as a goal and you're intentional about it, and you have strategies around increasing the number of women in a company, on a board, in an industry, it will happen. The problem is it tends to be an afterthought, not the agenda. And so as a result, we don't have the results we need. I do laugh sometimes when I see advertisements for employees to go work at tech companies. If you just look at the language, it's like, are you ready to be a warrior? Are you ready to, take on this fight? It's like, just everything. The language is male. The language is not trying very hard to attract women. So I just use that as a small example. I mean, if you're intentional about language, you're intentional about where you recruit, you're intentional about pipeline development, you're intentional about holding yourself accountable, which is to say, if you look around and you don't have any women, you have a problem and you have to fix it in a short period of time.
Yeah, my last question. What's your call to action in 2021 and beyond to increase women's leadership in business?
This is our chance. COVID put a big fat spotlight on the fact that we have a lot more to do to get women in the workforce and keep women in the workforce. So shame on us if we don't respond to that call to action. And so for me, I'm working really hard to get investments in this care economy for executives such as yourself, take a look at how you operate as a company and what more could be done. And for women who are in the workforce, step up, go for that promotion. Don't say no, go get some extra training, go back and go to school, go finish your degree. Like, let's look back 10 years from now and say, this was a turning point. COVID brought to the forefront the reality of inequality in our workforce. And let's use that to recommit ourselves and make some real changes.
Thanks so much for joining me today. It's so great to see you. This has been an awesome discussion. And once again, I want to congratulate you on your award. You and all this year's award winners are truly trailblazers for gender equality and diversity. And thank you again for everything you're doing every day to make a huge difference in America.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary Raimondo and Karen Lynch, two women in organizations working to ensure that women are in the workforce and have access to leadership positions. What a day, intentionality and shining the spotlight. To close this out, I want to welcome Sharon Reynolds, CEO and founder of DevMar Products and the DevMar Family Company, chair of the WBC Advisory Council, and WBC board member, a true leader in one of those prolific women's movements ever. And Andy Simon, founder and CEO of Simon Associates, and a co-chair of the WBC Advisory Council. Andy and Sharon, we look forward to your takeaways from today. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Gwen. What a nice introduction. Sharon, you and I, 2 years ago, were part of a video we did for the WBC as its first summit. Remember that?
Yes.
And don't you remember? And I remember so vividly that Sharon was telling us about the history, the hurdles, the glass ceilings, all of the things that we had to deal with. And I was the futurist anthropologist looking ahead, trying to see where we were going and how well we were getting there. What's so interesting is 2 years later, how far we've come and how far we have to go. But it's very interesting to watch the stories. I'm a storyteller. And what we know is that if you can't see it, you can't be it. And as I listened today, what did we hear? Oh, yes, everyone had a story. I think Thasunda Brown Duckett's father said it so well. People see your glory, but not your story. So what is it in all the stories that we heard today? Yes, we heard about the hurdles, the glass ceilings, the lack of intentionality, the way in which women have to, in fact, want to do something, but also not to have imposter syndrome, to really amplify the qualities they bring and to believe in themselves. But it was very interesting. I bet our audience, and I was watching the chat, they could really feel the power of the moment and the movement. And that's what WBC is all about, amplifying and accelerating what's happening all over, but through collaboration, really making it transformational. So our question for you, as you wrap up the day today and think about tomorrow, can you dream the dreams? What we know as an anthropologist or in the neurosciences is if you can imagine it, you can begin to believe it. The interesting part is that you can't see it in its spots. So we have to see it as we pull it together like today. So if you're imagining a future and we can change the world for women, women of color, LGBTQ women, and for men who want to help women, you're going to hear about Ally for Women tomorrow. It's really Ally for Her. It's so exciting to watch the collaboration. Now is our moment. So let's feel the power of this day as it ripples through every part of our society. And I want to ask Sharon to share some of her reflections from today. And I'll come back and share some of mine, but think about your own, because the ending is often what we remember best. And while I love the whole day from the beginning till now, don't forget the impact that this has on all of us as we change our own stories. Sharon, how about your reflections?
Oh, fantastic, Andy. And it seems like we were just having this conversation only yesterday. And here we are with so many significant milestones accomplished as we look toward the future. What started as a mission has led to our now living the vision for equal position, pay, and power for all business women. We still have a lot of work to do, given the fact that only 2.3% of all venture funding goes to women entrepreneurs, and even fewer dollars are granted to women of color. Yet, we must celebrate the amazing investment corporations like Sodexo, Walmart, and GM are making toward gender equity and diversity that's actually happening now. No more fluff. Time for action, right? So I was also moved by the passion and intentionality from the CEO Roundtable for Gender and Diversity Equity, from Jim Fitterling, Chairman and CEO of Dow, Tricia Griffith, President and CEO of Progressive Insurance, and Barbara Hampton, President and CEO of Siemens, as we learned how much their commitment and leadership has powerful impact in their organizations. And I think a couple of other observations I noted was nearly 1/3 or 31% of BlackRock's board of directors seats are occupied by women. And General Motors spent more than $663.4 million supporting women-owned businesses in 2020. And those are some significant milestones that we want to share and that we want to celebrate. Andy?
Well, and as each of them said, we can't go back. And so we have to keep pushing forward. I heard some really tidbits that sort of stuck with me. I love that at Progressive, they're proud to report that every employee with similar performance experience and job responsibilities, the women earn $1 for every dollar earned by a man, and people of color earn the same as every dollar earned by a white coworker. Now, as you and I were talking, why is that so hard? And why is that so magical? And why has that been such a fight that we've had to achieve? Just do it and see what happens as an accelerator from that. So it becomes quite interesting to listen. At Siemens, they believe by advancing women of color, they're strengthening their team culture. Wow. If you understand culture, the power of the team is important. So it's what exposes us to new perspectives, they said, and sparks more creativity. People feel empowered, and I love these words, to bring their full, authentic selves to work. You want a half a person at work, or you want the whole person who wakes up in the morning and is so committed to come, can't wait to get to work? And at Dow, they put more than $1 billion per year towards supporting women-owned businesses. Tomorrow has so much to celebrate. So what do you see coming tomorrow, Sharon? And then I'll share with you some of the things I'm looking forward to.
Sure. Well, I think tomorrow opens the door to what is happening in corporate leadership, how they're leading the charge, and the progress in the WBC's 9 action initiatives. We're going to hear about how corporations are pushing us forward, literally leading the charge. You will hear from leaders in the field discussing what they are doing to change the role in women in business, substantially and not incrementally. We will also be recognizing the 2021 Awardees for Gender and Diversity Excellence and how women of color are leading that charge. While all of the 9 action initiatives are important, some to highlight are on what we are. Increasing the number of women CEOs in the P&L roles in the C-suite, yet only 8% or 41 of CEOs at Fortune 500 companies are female. We've got a lot of work to do there, Andy. Increasing the amount of capital available to women entrepreneurs. Less than 3% of all VC funding goes to women entrepreneurs. And the push forward to place women and women of color on corporate boards. This is still a challenge to overcome. And in 2020, women held 11% of board seats, up from 7%. All S&P 500 boards now include women. And finally, how are we going to attract and retain women in science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM? The change we always used to say comes slow, very slowly, and then swish, all at once. We are almost on the brink of the sea change, and we cannot let up and slide back. Particularly important is how to re-engage women who found themselves out of work during the pandemic and now trying to find a different type of work to balance their home lives and work lives in this hybrid generation. Andy?
Yep, and don't forget how we're going to amplify the power of purpose. Joey Ryman is going to be here to talk about both the changing corporation, where purpose is driving as opposed to an afterthought. And why is Mona Lisa smiling? You're going to say, Mona Lisa smiling? You must come and hear it. And Indra Noy is going to talk about, how does purpose really create a culture that is transformative? I'm really interested in sharing the business collaborative Energizer bunnies tomorrow. It's really fascinating how all of this trends that we're seeing is creating something bigger than any part of it. It really is accelerating the movement forward. And I do think that's what is so exciting to listen to and to engage with and to celebrate. So we are pushing every part of our society forward. We all are. And everyone in the audience, as I was watching your notes, were all saying, this is exciting. What Magic Johnson's doing is so exciting, it's so powerful. It's happening, and it's happening together. And as we're pushing it forward, we're realizing, as we started our day today, that this isn't a think tank. This is a do tank. And I can't emphasize that enough. What is a do tank? It doesn't just, hope. Hope is not a good strategy. It makes it happen. And that's what's happening. And that's what's so much fun. So the Women's Business Collaborative, the WBC, is ready to build the future faster together because, in fact, it's happening. And I often say the future is now. Sharon, wrap us up.
Oh, absolutely, Andy. And speaking of trailblazers, the incredible Thasunda Duckett, CEO of TIAA, so eloquently stated, choose to lead all the way in and lead unapologetically. I just was resonated by that statement. It was just so timely. And then we'd also like to thank Edie Frazier and Balaji Janapathy for an empowering opening statement for their vision and leadership of the WBC. And in closing, the WBC is the only women's movement positioned to drive change and report on its impact globally. And with over 76 partner organizations who have joined us, we are unstoppable. So come back tomorrow and prepare to be even more amazed. We enjoyed bringing this segment to you. Andy?
Thank you. Bye now.
At the beginning, staircases and all, following the footsteps, running faster, racing in the moment. Somebody call my name. Can we get together and rattle the gilded cage? 'Cause we were born to rise and shine. Yeah, we were born not before, but right on time, right on time, right on time. Right on time, right on time. We are right on time, right on time. Right on time.
Changing for the moment, never mind the proof. She's moving sideways.
All those highways. How she gonna get there? Somebody raise the roof.
Raise the
Fables and folk tales,
they rarely tell the whole truth. That we were born to rise and shine. Yeah, we were born not before, but right on time. Right on time, right on time.
we are.
Right on time, right on time.
Yes, we are.
Right on time, right on time.
We're gonna tell you now.
Right on time.
Everybody wants to have a secret.
We get up, we get down.
We're not messing around.
No, no, no.
Watching ivory towers fall to pieces.
There's a will, there's a way, there's a price that we pay on the back before. Together we get more and more and more and more.
were born to rise and shine. Yeah, we were born not before the time. Right on time, 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 right on time. We are right on time, right on time. We are right on time. Start at the beginning, staircases and all, following the footsteps of running faster, racing in the moon. Somebody call my name. Can we get together and rattle the gilded cage? 'Cause we were born, rise and shine.